It all starts with a blonde girl confessing her feelings. A young redhead also smiles while holding someone's hand. Shortly after, a girl in a kimono expresses her desire to live a normal life, and a blue-haired girl talks excitedly about what she has recently come to love. All this madness leaves Kim Yoo-sung completely exhausted and confused. Suddenly, a heart monitor beeps and an eye opens. The young man wakes up confused in a hospital bed, not knowing where he is. The doctor and his mother ask, through tears, if the university student remembers anything. He remembers there was a fire in the lab, and he passed out trying to save his hard drive. Still dazed, he tries to understand why he woke up in a hospital. However, his eyes widen when he notices something very strange. Seeing his reflection, he discovers that it is not his original face. After being discharged, he pieces together the memories that surfaced during his stay. Looking out the car window, the protagonist realizes he has been reincarnated. He now occupies the body of a student who is the son of immigrants. The original owner of the body had been in a car accident over the weekend. Since his old body perished in the fire, he assumes he is now Kim Yoo-sung. This makes him excited to finally be free from the nightmare of academic life, but he tries to calm himself, as this body possession could end at any moment. Arriving home, he wonders how he will manage to adapt to this new life. His new mother affectionately asks him to go upstairs and get plenty of rest. The body walks instinctively until it stops in front of his bedroom door. He feels a bit strange entering another person's private space, but upon opening the door, he is absolutely horrified by the scene. The room is completely packed with shelves full of colorful manga. There are several posters of magical girls scattered across the walls. In that moment, he realizes that the former owner of the body was a total geek. In disbelief, he closes the door and wonders if this is even real. He falls to his knees on the floor, doubting his ability to live as Kim Yoo-sung. Surrounded by dolls, he fears his parents will notice if his personality changes. Not knowing what to do, he ends up noticing a familiar detail in the mirror. He realizes his hair and the bracelet are identical to those of a character. Startled by the realization, he quickly crawls across the floor. He discovers that his appearance perfectly mimics a manga poster. The protagonist is in shock realizing the boy was an otaku cosplayer. He decides to read the manga to learn how to imitate the boy's personality. But he feels embarrassed when he finds a ridiculously cheesy romance cover. That is until he finally remembers having seen a similar character before. It was from an extremely famous and successful romantic comedy manga. The work was acclaimed for following a classic formula with the author's unique style. However, the childhood friend ended up beating all the other protagonists in the end. This unexpected conclusion caused a lot of outrage among fans on the internet. Since the manga in his hands seems to follow the same path, he decides to give it a chance. However, the story is so engaging that he cannot stop reading at all. The next day at the restaurant, he admits he spent the whole night reading and liked it. His mother pulls him from his thoughts by asking him to take the customers' orders. He almost replies in a cheesy way and dies of embarrassment at what his body used to say. Still, he tries to cheer himself up with the perk of eating free meat at the restaurant. At that moment, the doorbell rings and he turns his head in surprise. He sees two new customers entering and feels like he knows them from somewhere. The blonde girl smiles and says she is going to feed him. The blonde guy feels extremely awkward being called Ryuji. The protagonist hears the name and is shocked by the coincidence. He remembers the cover of the famous romantic comedy manga. The young man realizes that this customer is the protagonist of the work. Scared, he asks both customers to wait a moment. He deduces that he has actually ended up inside the world of a book. His mind replays his death in the fire and waking up in that body. The big truth is that Kim Yoo-sung was just a minor side character. He is shocked to be living exactly like the manga he read. The problem is that he hasn't read the main work and has no advantages. But he tries to calm down by remembering that the world is in no danger. The best strategy now is to avoid getting involved with Sakamoto Ryuji. That way, he will finally be able to live a normal and peaceful life. After that, he starts focusing on studying and shaping his personality. The effort pays off, and he lands a full academic scholarship. He also joins the student council and changes his way of acting. Despite this whole new routine, the possession was never undone. Without alternatives, he decides to focus only on preparing for the future. His first plans include focusing entirely on making a lot of money. But soon he starts exercising intensely on a gym treadmill. He feels that even in a calm story, it is good to have plenty of physical strength. Training with heavy weights leaves him completely exhausted and sweaty, but he ends up finding it fun and develops an obsession with gaining muscle. Time passes and spring finally arrives, marking the new school year. He stops in front of the bulletin board to check his new class. A classmate walks by and greets him excitedly for having arrived early. But the young man is scared to see that Yusong is now a huge, muscular man. With a deep voice, he replies that he hasn't found his name on the list yet. The student enters the hallways and reflects on his second year of school. The first year flew by while he was training intensely. During the last few months, he started lifting ridiculously high loads, and he gained an absurd amount of muscle mass just to protect himself. After all, in manga, it is normal for monsters or aliens to show up out of nowhere. The young man tries to convince himself that he did all this for an uncertain future. He walked without drawing attention in the first year and intends to keep the pace. However, suddenly he hears someone scream the protagonist's name in the next room, and he notices the presence of Yaguchi Maya, who is the main heroine of the original manga. Right after, Sakamoto Ryuji appears with a tired expression. Yusong panics when he realizes he ended up in the exact same class as him. He is annoyed for having chosen a distant school just to avoid the blonde guy. Sitting in his chair, he remembers the bad gut feeling he had earlier. Besides having lost his wallet, he bumped into a girl he has never seen before. The teacher enters the room and orders everyone to return to their seats. The man understands the excitement of the first day and asks everyone to pay attention. He reveals he has a very important announcement, and the whole class gossips out of curiosity. Smiling, he tells the youngsters that they have just received a new transfer student. A very beautiful blonde girl enters the class radiating joy, drawing sighs of admiration. The students are enchanted, and the teacher tells the class to be quiet. The man asks everyone to be nice to the newcomer and tells her to introduce herself. The blonde girl introduces herself happily as Kishimoto Rika and lists the things she likes most. Seeing the scene, Yusung realizes in frustration that she ended up in the same class as the protagonist. He immediately deduces that this transfer student is another one of the original manga's heroines. Even without having read the main work, he knows she won a popularity poll. This happened even though she wasn't the big winner of the story in the end. The teacher then points to an empty desk right next to Sakamoto Ryuji. Upon seeing the newcomer, the blonde guy gets scared, recognizing the violent girl from that morning. Rika also widens her eyes and points her finger in shock upon recognizing her classmate. She yells furiously, calling the boy a pervert because of the bump from earlier. Teacher ignores the confusion and thinks it's great that the two students already know each other so well. The blonde young woman walks to her desk, firing a death glare at the protagonist. She turns her face away in a huff while the boy remains completely tense about the situation. But the mood changes when the boy extends his hand to return the wallet she had lost. The girl blushes, thanking him, while Yusung observes everything with a desire to change schools. The big guy sighs, remembering he just wants to secure a peaceful future without surprises. He knows he can predict things since that world works like a romantic comedy, and since these plots always have twists, he spent a lot of time studying the genre. In his past life, he read many magazines to learn the patterns of these cliché manga. Later, Sakamoto approaches the newcomer, asking to talk to her alone for a moment. The blonde guy explains with a serious expression that he needs to talk about the morning accident. The girl blushes slightly and agrees to accompany her classmate for just a few minutes. The two leave together, and the other students start gossiping about a possible romance. Seeing the opportunity, Yusung gets up, making up a lame excuse to leave the room. The big guy walks through the hallways, exuding a dark and quite intimidating aura. The students tremble with fear, spreading absurd rumors that he is a dangerous mobster. He notices everyone's dread, but thinks it's great, because it makes escape easier without drawing attention. The young man rushes to spy on the couple, using all his knowledge about the script. He understands that he needs to see these classic events in person to gather information. With his experience, he quickly deduces the only place where a couple would talk in private. The protagonist smiles confidently, knowing exactly to which location the two lovebirds went. Far from curious eyes, Sakamoto and Rika meet in the calmness behind the school. The young man joins his hands in bows, sincerely apologizing for the terrible misunderstanding. Hidden in the bushes, Yusung observes the scene, recognizing the old forgiveness trap. He almost can't believe it when he sees the girl doing the same klichika pose as manga heroines. The blonde young woman stares at the bowing classmate and cracks a small smile, finding the situation comical. She can't hold it in and bursts into laughter, leaving the blonde guy very confused. Having fun with his innocence, she jokes that she didn't expect such a cute gesture. The boy asks, relieved, if she is not mad, and the blonde girl guarantees it was just an accident. She admits to having faked irritation just to see his desperate and funny reactions. The newcomer continues provoking her classmate, demonstrating exactly why she won the poll. Yusung perfectly concludes that this was the first event between the two characters. To him, that introduction followed exactly the handbook of high school romantic comedies. However, the spying is interrupted when a female voice suddenly calls his name. The girl questions why the future secretary of the student council is squatting there. Hiding her face with a fan, she asks with disdain if he was spying on the other female students. Yusung recognizes the student council president, who is the classic villain-type character. Despite her look, she is just a secondary heroine who always gets involved with the protagonist. Trying to cover up, Yusung rips out a weed, claiming he was looking for decorations for the room. The president looks at the dirty weed and questions if that would really look good in the council. The big guy stays silent while holding the plant, trying to think of a better excuse. The president blushes slightly and says she will put the plant in the meeting room. He thanks her, relieved that his lame excuse actually worked. The girl questions what brought him there on such a busy start of semester day. She smiles and invites him for a special meal with the student council. The young woman turns her back and hurries the big guy so they don't lose their seats in the cafeteria. Yusung finds the idea strange because he knows the food there isn't the rich girl's style. Stopping her walk, the president replies with a proud smile that he doesn't know her. Laughing elegantly, she asks if he thinks she is ignorant about commoner culture. She brags about having already eaten popular dishes and claims not to have such a closed mind. The young man sweats cold, thinking that almost sounded like an insult to the normal students. Even so, he sincerely warns her that the school cafeteria does not serve that type of dish. The brunette is startled, and the big guy explains that they serve an option called juden. She grumbles, finding the name of the dish quite strange and too direct for her taste. The president whimpers in disgust, imagining if she will really be forced to eat that. Yusung judges the reaction, remembering she just bragged about eating commoner food. Suddenly, the vice president of the student council appears, looking for his leader. The guy in glasses approaches and recognizes the big guy standing next to the president. Adjusting his glasses in a sinister way, the young man deduces the situation in a totally wrong way. The vice president yells furiously while Yusung tries to understand the reason for such rudeness. The guy accuses Yusung of forcing the poor girl to skip her meal to look for him around the school. The protagonist tilts his head, confused, thinking it's a big exaggeration to call her poor. Very embarrassed, the rich girl screams, asking where her subordinate got that idea from. Shinjiro ignores the leader and promises not to tolerate any more insolence against his beloved mistress. Giving up on explaining, the girl drags the loyal subordinate back to eat a steak in the room. While dragging the whiny guy, the president says that the meal together will be for next time. Alone in the yard, the big guy is left unable to process what just happened. Time passes and the afternoon falls, announcing the long-awaited end of the first school day at the train station. The big guy waits for the train while passengers walk away, scared by his appearance. He reflects that the great romantic comedy story must just be officially starting. To his joy, the intense muscle training made everyone at school avoid messing with him. Yu-sung smiles proudly, feeling that having turned into a giant man was the best choice of his life. Looking at the boarding screen, he sighs, noting that the next train will take 10 minutes. He opens a juice, relaxing with the certainty that the main plot will continue without his presence. But at that very moment of unbreakable peace, a delicate hand suddenly holds his jacket firmly. The big guy gets a terrible fright when he comes face to face with the newly transferred Rika, smiling excitedly. Completely terrified, the young man sweats cold, wondering what on earth the main heroine is doing there. The blonde young woman celebrates her huge stroke of luck for having found her classmate so quickly. She approaches, showing her cell phone, and asks for his kind help to find a specific location. Observing the blonde, the big guy gets suspicious and tries to understand how she already knows his name. Noticing the classmate's astonishment, she simply points obviously to the school ID badge on his chest. The newcomer smiles, claiming the answer was plastered right in everyone's face the whole time. The young man freezes, feeling like a complete idiot for having forgotten such a pathetic detail. Changing the subject, the student compliments her classmate, guaranteeing that her instincts were correct. The big guy reacts, confused, wondering where the sudden reputation of being a good guy came from. After all, he barely spoke to the newcomer and avoided her during the whole first day of class. Annoyed, he questions the reason for the compliments and why she decided to talk to him specifically right now. The blonde reveals that it was impossible not to notice someone gigantic emanating such a scary aura. She admits she heard several absurd rumors about his past and got truly curious. But everything changed when she saw the young man treating the snobby council president with naturalness. Yu-sung concludes, terrified, that the girl observed everything and already started gathering information in secret. Yu-sung panics, noticing that the heroine interpreted his actions the wrong way. Hypnotized by the blonde's cuteness, he considers pretending to be a mobster to try to scare her. But his thoughts are abruptly interrupted when the young woman screams his name. The young woman puffs her cheeks, annoyed at being ignored, and the big guy apologizes quickly. Demanded for an answer, the young man just thanks her for the compliment in a very awkward way. Smiling, the newcomer guarantees that soon the whole class will realize the young man's true essence. She affirms that the absurd rumors don't matter because she knows he is a very kind person. With a radiant smile, she promises to be his friend and asks him to take good care of her at school. The protagonist sighs, realizing that acting like a bad gangster wouldn't work on her. Without many options, he decides to just play along since they are classmates. He inwardly decrees that he will continue with his act as a mere side character, no matter the cost. The big guy thinks it's great that the blonde continues, totally fooled by his fake kindness. Suddenly, the girl remembers the main reason for the conversation and shows him her final destination. She whimpers, saying the subway lines are confusing, and asks for help to get home. Yu-sung recognizes the upscale neighborhood and deduces that the heroine also has a very wealthy background. The blonde realizes they will take almost the same route and celebrates her luck to take the train with him. The young man confirms that the station where he lives is only 2 simple stops away. The student thinks this coincidence is wonderful, but the big guy sees it as a problem. He fries his brain trying to adapt his plans to deal with the unwanted proximity. The big problem of all is that he never read the entire main manga in his past life. That is why he concludes that becoming friends with the heroine will bring valuable information about the script. He soon imagines the blonde protagonist asking for love advice in the middle of the school journey. Yu-sung smiles confidently, believing that a slight change won't alter the course of the main plot. Putting the plan into action, the big guy surprises his classmate by offering a cold drink. He states it is a small thank you for the friendship, and the blonde chooses a sweet soda. Thirsty, the young woman drinks the soda with a lot of gusto right there at the vending machine. She breaks into a giant and extremely radiant smile, celebrating the wonderful taste of the drink. Yusung finds the reaction fun, and the girl explains that she avoided sweets because of her diet. The student is slightly confused, questioning the reason for a beautiful young woman to be on a diet. Excited, she proudly displays some stunning photos as a model for a famous magazine. The student reveals that she modeled in her hometown and therefore needed to watch her weight. The big guy insinuates that the beauty of the photos is pure makeup, and the blonde yells, offended by him. The train finally arrives at the platform, and the young man changes the subject quickly to escape the fury. The train cars stop at the station with the doors opening for all passengers to board. Already inside the car, some passengers stare at the protagonist and whisper, dying of dread. No one dares to make eye contact with the big guy, clearing a huge space around the two. The blonde laughs, finding the situation fun, while the protagonist feels like a major kidnapper. Shortly after, the girl starts checking the rail line map to figure out her way. With the train approaching the stop, the big guy stands up and walks toward the car doors. He disembarks at the platform, and the blonde runs after him, desperate, thinking she would be left behind. He quietly warns her that her house is only 2 simple stops away from there. The doors close slowly and the heroine waves excitedly, saying she is counting on him for the next day. The train leaves and the protagonist stands on the platform, shocked by the promise for the next day. He points to his own face, trying to understand how his quiet life ended up becoming such a mess. The next day, the lunch bell finally rings, exciting all the students eager for food. Isolated in the yard far from the cafeteria chaos, the protagonist prepares for his meal. The big guy opens his traditional wooden lunchbox, stuffed with delicious kimbap rolls. He takes a large piece with his chopsticks and brings it to his mouth, enjoying his well-deserved peace. But his tranquility ends when the blonde heroine appears suddenly, shaking in the parking lot. With teary eyes, she asks in shock if the lonely classmate eats out here every day. The girl asks, sad, why he eats isolated in the trash area, and he explains he avoids bothering others in the classroom. The big guy states that it is easier that way and reminds that one day everyone will realize who he really is. She blushes, agreeing to wait quietly but insists that eating alone seems very lonely. Changing the subject, the blonde notices the lunchbox full of kimbap and asks to taste that dish she only saw in Korean soap operas. Yusong finds the sudden mood swing a bit bizarre but agrees, extending the lunchbox to her. Radiant with joy, the girl smiles and suggests that from now on they always have lunch together. He warns defensively that he won't be able to bring kimbap every day, and the blonde yells that she isn't doing this for the food. While she eats, the young man reflects admiringly on the ease and naturalness of getting close to someone so cheerful. The young woman savors the food, thinking everything is delicious, and confirms that the big guy's family really does have a Korean restaurant. The protagonist smiles at the humble compliment and asks her to tell his mother how much she enjoyed the meal. Excited, the student offers a piece of her Japanese rolled omelette in exchange for another slice of kimbap. The big guy accepts the trade willingly and delicately picks up the piece with his chopsticks. He brings the omelette to his mouth, expecting a savory and comforting taste. However, his eyes widen in shock upon feeling the true explosion on his palate. The extreme sweetness of the food hits him full force, making him question if that was a cake or a savory dish. Scared, he asks how much sugar she used, and the blonde replies innocently that she just followed her own heart. Facing the situation with extreme seriousness, the big guy warns that so much sugar will be harmful and promises to teach her the right recipe. She asks what he uses in the preparation and is horrified to discover that the classmate seasons only with salt. The blonde laughs at the answer, thinking he has terrible taste, and tries to defend that her sweet way is the best. The pleasant conversation is suddenly interrupted by the high-pitched sound of a whistle blowing very loudly in the yard. Both turn their faces in surprise, noticing the unusual presence of the council president and her vice in the area. The rich president whistles frantically while she trembles with shame, observing the scene from afar. She lowers her face completely red, murmuring about the absurdity that is the improper relationship between the students. Pointing her finger in indignation, the black-haired girl screams that she will never allow such indecency in her school. The big guy is confused, not understanding where she got the crazy idea of a relationship between them. The vice president approaches, walking seriously, and decrees that hiding in an isolated corner to eat together is a crime. Stamping his foot in irritation, Shinjiro asks if the protagonist plans to give more lame excuses to cover it up. Tired of the drama, Yusung denies any relationship and points out the strange coincidence bumping into them all the time. Rika agrees that bumping into them makes sense, but finds it bizarre that this happens exactly at every break. The president fires a death glare at the blonde, trying to hide her nervousness behind her red fan. At that instant, Rika points her finger excitedly upon finally recognizing her classmate from the gloomy president rumors. The black-haired girl freezes immediately upon hearing the embarrassing nickname. Laughing with innocence, the blonde confirms the rumor that the president always walks alone wearing that bizarre black uniform. The president loses control and screams that the color represents the dignity and maximum honor of the student council. But she panics when Rika comments that everyone thinks this cosplay and asks her to own her taste. Completely destroyed by shame, the president trembles and the blonde still tries to offer a piece of egg with a smile. Unable to bear the humiliation anymore, the council leader points her finger, warning that she won't let it slide and will return for revenge. The girl runs desperately, hiding her face while her loyal vice president tries to catch up to her in the yard. Yusung and Rika observe the dramatic escape in absolute silence. The blonde tilts her head, confused, asking what she said wrong, and the protagonist just admits not knowing the answer. Later in the classroom, the big guy gets a scare upon hearing the girl calling his name again. Rika approaches with her bag in hand and asks, smiling, for the reason why her classmate hasn't gone home yet. She notes that he is not in any club, and Yusung explains he only focused on the student council during the past year. The young woman lets out a giggle and proposes they use the free afternoon to visit some clubs. The young man thinks about the suggestion, agreeing that living the experience up close is much better than just imagining the script. He gets up excited by the idea and promptly asks which club they should start the visit with. The protagonist is scared to hear his partner declare, with total naturalness, that she plans to visit absolutely everyone. But the initial shock gives way to a maniacal smile while the big guy's eyes shine intensely. Emanating a dark and powerful aura, he reveals wanting to test the limits of his own insane physical training. With this dangerous goal in mind, the two head straight for the soccer club court. A boy kicks the soccer ball with a lot of force on the school court. The ball goes far from the goalpost, and the goalkeeper sighs, complaining about his teammates' terrible aim. The two troublemakers argue, while one of them mocks his friend for missing 5 kicks in a row. The bully gets annoyed with the soccer club members, claiming they arrived at the field first. Confident, the troublemaker prepares to kick again, wanting to prove it is easy to score a goal. At that moment, a scary voice calls the doe's attention, mocking their abilities. The bullies get a big scare upon recognizing the big guy wearing the team's number 10 jersey. With a serious look, the captain warns that the club needs to use the field and tells both to get out of there. The delinquents tremble with dread upon seeing it is the feared Ryo Ahai from the 3rd year. Without thinking twice, the duo apologizes desperately and runs away from the field. A player thanks him for the help while the captain sighs, saying that dealing with slackers is normal. Ryo Ahai soon changes the subject, asking if any promising newcomer has caught his eye for the team. The captain laments the lack of talent because he really wishes to win this year's national championship. He feels that only a truly strong freshman would be capable of changing the soccer club's destiny. Far from there, the two delinquents walk frustrated by the humiliation they just suffered. The bully suggests returning to give them a beating, but his friend refuses to get involved in more trouble. The classmate reminds him that the captain's kicks exceed 60 miles per hour and can be lethal. The troublemaker yells that in a fight, experience counts for more, and ends up bumping into someone on the street. Furious with the bump, the guy turns his face, cursing the stranger for interrupting his speech. But he loses his voice immediately upon coming face to face with the imposing figure of the giant Kim Yusung. With a death glare, the protagonist asks, in a threatening tone for the bully to repeat what he said. Both delinquents turn pale and sweat cold, recognizing the monster standing in front of them. The duo screams, terrified, calling the big guy the hair of the mad dog fist, and runs away. Yu-sung is left completely confused while Rika approaches, reading the school flyer. Other students observe everything from afar, spreading rumors that he defeated gangs just with a look. The blonde scolds her classmate for picking a fight, and he tries to defend himself by saying he just looked. She sighs, noting that his look is already a problem, and the big guy agrees that the situation is difficult. Back at the field, one of the team players notices a strange movement approaching. Everyone goes into shock upon seeing Yu-sung walking toward the court next to the blonde newcomer. The club members panic, thinking the monster came to avenge the delinquents from before. Maintaining his calm, the captain steps forward, guaranteeing his teammates it shouldn't be anything so petty. A player gets desperate, remembering the rumors that the big guy was banned from club activities. Ryohei admits he heard the terrible gossip, but guarantees the truth became clear upon seeing him up close. Observing Yu-sung's insane physique, the captain concludes he is a national-level delinquent. He approaches the protagonist, commenting with respect that he has heard a lot about his fame. Crossing his arms, Ryohei introduces himself as the team leader and asks what brings him to the field. Yu-sung replies calmly that he wishes to join the club and asks about the admission test. The captain gets tense, noting that the newcomer is much taller and more intimidating than he imagined. Ryohei admires the monster musculature of the young man, which is visible even under his clothes. The leader quickly imagines the team lifting the national championship trophy with the help of that giant. With eyes shining with excitement, the captain decides desperately that he needs that boy on the team. Yu-sung finds the veteran's glazed look strange, and Ryohei quickly covers up to explain the test rules. The challenge is extremely simple and consists only of kicking the ball into the goal with maximum force. The big guy smiles excitedly at the instruction to use all his strength in a single free kick. Since he only has a single chance, Yu-sung decides not to hold back and activates all the power of his training. Concentrating an absurd energy, he flexes his legs and an intense purple aura appears around him. With muscle strength reaching extreme levels, the boy's eyes glow as he prepares. The protagonist twists his body with violence and launches his leg against the ball in a scary movement. The impact of the kick generates a colossal explosion of energy that illuminates the entire soccer field. The captain and his classmate are left jaw dropped, affirming that the ball was so fast that it disappeared into thin air. The soccer field remains in absolute silence, showing that the goalpost is completely empty. The team captain sweats cold and widens his eyes, terrified, not understanding what on earth just happened. The big guy stares at the ground where the soccer ball lies completely burst and withered after the impact. Realizing that soccer won't work out, the young man turns his face and asks what the other clubs are. Yu-sung decides to go to basketball, feeling that school journey has become a fun game of levels. The news spreads quickly through the school, with students gossiping about the imminent destruction of the teams. A curious crowd runs to follow the show, while the council president hears everything from afar. The black-haired girl straightens her posture, decided to act now that the big guy has finally started moving. In the basketball club, Yu-sung slams a dunk so monstrous that it breaks the entire backboard and scares the players. In the baseball club, he swings the bat with absurd force, creating a shockwave that terrifies the pitcher. In the tennis club, the protagonist's blow is so violent that it opens a true crater on the court floor. After the massacre, the list of flyers shows the soccer, baseball, and tennis clubs properly crossed out. Rika celebrates excitedly, crossing out the names on the paper and calling his overwhelming victory a single-blow slaughter. The big guy sighs, tired of the confusion, and asks the blonde how many sports clubs are still left on the list. The girl smiles playfully, provoking her classmate for him finally being curious about the activities. Putting on glasses out of nowhere, the young woman strikes an intellectual pose, promising to answer with the data she collected. She explains that, ignoring the 3 clubs that won't have tests today, only 3 great options remain available. The first option is the track and field club, which promises to build physical endurance and unbreakable mental focus. The second choice is the swimming club, focused on improving cardiovascular capacity and whole body strength. Finally, the last option is the feared kendo club, famous for training rigid discipline and a lot of mental strength. Adjusting her glasses with style, the girl concludes that the big guy must choose between these 3 activities. She smiles, proud of her perfect explanation, and the young man thanks her, saying that so much effort wasn't necessary. The blonde asks cheerfully what the next destination will be, but Yusung stays silent, observing her face. Intrigued, the big guy asks suddenly if the newcomer has done any acting work besides being a model. The girl widens her eyes in surprise, and he quickly changes the subject, saying she just seems to have talent for acting. Completely red, the blonde winds her fingers in her own hair, confessing she is ashamed to talk about it. Very shy, she looks away and finally admits she used to do something a little similar to acting. Yusong gets a scare and sweats cold, realizing the huge gravity of that simple, innocent revelation. He panics, concluding that this mysterious past could break the genre rules of the main story. He feels he needs to investigate better if he wants to mess with the classic narrative of the romance manga. But noticing her embarrassment, he holds her arm gently and says for them to continue the mission. The protagonist decides that forcing the subject now would be a terrible idea and resolves to wait for the right moment. Resuming the pace, he decrees that the next target will be Kendo, and Rika accompanies him with her usual joy. Minutes later, a true crowd of students gathers, anxious, outside the doors of the Kendo club. The doors open, revealing the monstrous figure of Yusung, and the public goes wild with his arrival. The students open a path, spreading gossip that the giant plans to dominate all the school teams. A student from the journalism club freezes with fear, refusing the absurd idea of trying to interview the big guy. Taking the chance, Rika puts on her shiny glasses and announces with pride that she is the monster's official manager. Yusung hears the girl take the lead in size, realizing the situation has completely slipped out of his control. Inside the club, a purple-haired girl walks furiously, believing the newcomer wants to destroy everything. The captain, Fuma Yukika, raises her bamboo sword, promising to stop the giant's fury with her own hands. The club members vibrate with the courage of their leader, who doesn't back down even an inch in front of Yusung. The protagonist is unfazed and says respectfully that he is there only to take the admission test. Yukika gives a side smile, complimenting the newcomer's boldness in maintaining his composure in front of her. Resting her bamboo sword on her shoulder, the captain decides the battle will be decided in a single confrontation. She explains that whoever lands the first clean hit wins and summons the big guy for a direct duel in the dojo. The audience screams, amazed at the rare chance to see the feared captain facing the supposed human weapon. The students film with their cell phones, cheering fervently for the veteran to wipe the floor with his face. Yusung sweats cold, finding it ridiculous to be treated as the great final boss of the school, while Rika laughs at the situation. The chatter ends abruptly when the captain screams, ordering absolute silence for the start of the combat. The crowd of students gets a big scare with the captain's sudden scream. Yukika decrees that the duel will be only between them and kicks out everyone who is not involved. With a threatening look, the veteran warns that she will fight anyone who tries to invade the place. The warning works immediately, and the students back off in silence, completely terrified. Rika comments that the girl is on a totally different level, and the big guy agrees. The protagonist reflects in silence, recognizing that the blonde is absolutely right about the veteran. The young man feels overwhelming pressure emanating from the girl, as if she were a giant snake. The big guy asks his classmate to wait outside, and the young woman wishes him good luck for the duel. Already positioned for combat, the veteran asks if the newcomer really won't wear armor. He doubts they have his size, and the captain decides to fight without protection to be fairer. The young man picks up the bamboo sword and warns coldly that he won't be held responsible if she gets hurt. The club leader finds the threat very funny and prepares confidently for the confrontation. With a sharp look, she promises he won't even touch her uniform and tells him to prepare himself. The big guy attacks quickly and both bamboo swords collide, generating a great impact. Both exchange fast blows while the girl compliments the good ability of the supposed delinquent. However, the captain guarantees that common muscles mean nothing against a true martial artist. With plenty of agility, the veteran dodges the newcomer's attack, forcing his weapon to the side. Taking advantage of the gap, the girl hits the giant's sword and launches it high, disarming him. She smiles confidently, mocking the young man for failing to break her basic defense stance. Without wasting time, the club leader advances quickly against the opponent to finish the fight. The protagonist just raises his hand calmly, while observing his sword spinning high up. The big guy grabs the weapon in mid-fall at the exact same instant the girl attacks. The captain interrupts her own strike halfway, totally startled by the overwhelming pressure. The girl retreats, realizing the newcomer let her disarm him on purpose to counter-attack. Yukika admits she underestimated him and understands that prolonging the fight will only put her in great danger. Emanating the fearsome aura of a giant snake, the veteran decides to end the duel in the next strike. The captain advances with everything, using her clan's secret technique to destroy the opponent at once. Without showing any fear, the big guy pushes his sword forward to intercept the attack. The veteran is hit full force in the stomach by the giant's weapon and ends up losing all her breath. The girl goes into shock upon realizing he used a secret technique of her own family. Recovering her stance, the leader swings her sword furiously, declaring his end has arrived. But the veteran is surprised and takes a devastating blow right in the middle of her face before reacting. The girl's weapon flies far away, while she tries to understand how she was hit without feeling murderous intent. The captain falls defeated to the ground, completely confused by not having noticed the young man's movement. The protagonist just holds his bamboo sword firmly after finishing the confrontation. Fallen to the ground, the veteran stares at the big guy, terrified, fearing the newcomer's true strength. Yusung observes his own muscles, realizing that his absurd strength comes from physical enhancement. The next morning, the students in the class spread the rumor that Yusung destroyed all the sports clubs. The youngsters gossip, saying that the kendo club captains ended up straight in the hospital. The big guy rests at his desk while the class whispers that he wants to dominate the whole school. The protagonist sighs, realizing that the previous day's confusion made his terrible reputation even worse. Raji is the only one acting normally, and Yusung deduces that the hero is tied to the work's main script. The young man pushes the thoughts away the moment Rika enters the room, smiling and greeting him excitedly. Suddenly, a red-haired girl invades the classroom, screaming the blonde protagonist's name. The other students are surprised and soon recognize the girl as a member of the kendo club. The manga hero is completely confused and asks why the girl is looking for him with such anger. The redhead accuses the hero of having beaten up the club's freshmen and claims to have heard everything in the hospital. The blonde guy tries to deny the accusation while Yusung and Rika watch the confusion from afar in silence. The situation worsens when a brown-haired student gets involved to defend the blonde guy. The defender states that the freshmen of the kendo club were to blame, leaving the redhead girl quite confused. The redhead girl explains that some students from the kendo club dragged her into an alley yesterday, and the hero appeared to save her. The brown-haired classmate confronts the redhead, asking if she still thinks the blame for the confusion lies entirely with the blonde hero. The girl tells the redhead to go back and keep the freshman in line, since she realized the blonde guy didn't do absolutely anything. The student defends the hero firmly, confirming that the true culprits of everything were the rowdy freshmen. But the red-haired young woman blushes suddenly and lifts her face with an expression of someone who just made a very important decision. She points her finger directly at the hero's face and demands, screaming, that the boy become her man immediately. The blonde protagonist is in shock without reacting while the redhead promises to make him the happiest guy in the whole world. The brown-haired classmate is left completely pale and speechless before that sudden declaration of love. The entire room starts gossiping non-stop while the redhead holds the hero's face with affection in front of everyone. Recovering her senses, the defender student screams desperately, totally rejecting that absurd idea of dating. Observing everything from afar, Yusung realizes, impressed, that the world of romantic comedies has no pity on heroes. Beside him, the blonde newcomer lets out a high-pitched scream of pure excitement with her eyes shining upon witnessing the romantic atmosphere. The brave passion draws total admiration from Rika, who thinks the redhead classmate's direct attitude is the coolest thing ever. The atmosphere in the room changes completely, with the students forming groups to bet on which girl will be the blonde's great choice. Some students faithfully believe that the childhood friend has much better chances for being incredibly sweet and beautiful. But others defend that the true prize is the fierce redhead who turns into a tame puppy just for her man. The big guy continues resting at his desk, noticing that the class simply can't stop gossiping about the redhead. He recognizes that the possessive and striking phrase said by the troublemaker girl really was a very memorable event. The young man assesses that having the courage to declare herself like that in front of everyone requires a perfect command of the script and the moment. The blonde young woman interrupts her classmate's thoughts, calling out his nickname while agreeing excitedly with the situation. With a provocative smile on her face, she asks who the big guy thinks will be the great winner of this love dispute. The young man shrugs, admitting to having no idea, and his partner grumbles, disappointed, finding the answer very lackluster. In silence, the big guy concludes that following the original story, the blonde hero would end up marrying the childhood friend. The blonde smiles, convinced, and claims to know exactly who the protagonist will end up with, leaving Yusung completely in shock. Winking with charm, the newcomer claims with all the certainty in the world that the blonde will end up dating the troublemaker girl. She imposes the condition of being the redhead's love counselor, while the giant fries his brain, trying to understand the craziness. A student doubts so much love confidence, but she brags, guaranteeing to be the greatest expert on romances in the whole school. The blonde makes up that people used to line up for her genius tipses, while Yusung judges the girl's excess of fantasy. Furious, she trembles, clenching her fists, because no one recognizes her incredible gift, and the big guy finds the excitement exaggerated. With shining eyes, the blonde approaches, needy, and begs the giant to dedicate more of his attention only to her. The protagonist is immediately awkward with the cute approach and stutters, losing his dark posture completely to escape the embarrassing situation. He looks to the side and ends up noticing the redhead girl, sitting right by the window of their room. The young man questions a classmate and discovers that the redhead won't stop begging for a date on the weekend. The classmate reveals that the troublemaker is using the excuse of buying a meal as an official apology request. The big guy agrees with his friend that going out to eat together on a weekend is practically the definition of a date. Leaving romance aside, his friend reveals a dark rumor that the redhead is the heir of a very influential person. He whispers, terrified, that the gossip indicates she is the legitimate daughter of the great leader of the feared mafia organization. The organization is described as one of the largest mafia groups, completely controlling the entire underworld of the Kanto region. Yusung replies with total coldness, disappointing the classmate who was expecting a terrified reaction worthy of such a dangerous rumor. The young man swallows hard and tries to calm down, remembering that the supposed mobster hasn't done absolutely anything bad against the class. The student considers calling him boss, and Yusung asks coldly for him to stop the madness. Reflecting alone, the protagonist realizes that mafia children are a very normal cliché in the world of romance manga. The redhead girl loses her patience completely and advances, screaming the blonde's name, while Yusung starts to believe the rumors. The troublemaker demands to schedule the outing soon, and the big guy thinks it's great that it's the hero dealing with that crazy mobster. Unable to bear that suffocating pressure anymore, the childhood friend gets in the middle and tells the troublemaker girl to back off for good. The redhead girl warns rudely that the matter is only with the blonde guy and tells the defender not to get involved in the conversation. Some side characters cry from pure envy of the hero's popularity, and others doubt that having mobsters on his tail is a good thing. The blonde runs away desperate during the rest of the day, being pursued relentlessly by the girl everywhere. The situation gets out of control, and the girl violently invades the boy's locker room, cornering the hero without mercy. Completely insane, the redhead points her finger and forces the poor, traumatized boy to accept the long-awaited date. The blonde hero cries in despair, while the redhead screams his name without mercy. Later in the cafeteria, Rika asks what Yusung will do during the Golden Week holiday. He replies that he will just help at his family's restaurant during the time off. Excited, the blonde asks if he doesn't want to visit her house in his free time. The big guy is surprised when she reveals she has a huge collection of manga at home. Rika brags, saying her father's collection would be able to fill an entire bookstore. Yusung accepts the invitation right away, and she promises to notify her father in advance. After that, the young woman finishes eating and seems to remember a small detail. The young man comments that she eats a lot for someone skinny, and Rika says that is normal. She explains that if she doesn't have a proper lunch, she ends up devouring many snacks during the afternoon. With a mischievous smile, she states that all the food goes straight to her chest. The protagonist blushes and stutters, completely in shock at such a bold revelation, but the blonde changes her attitude and calls him a pervert, revealing it was all a trap. Suddenly, the redhead mobster sits at the same table with her tray and scares both classmates. Rika notices the perfect opportunity and stands up excitedly to approach the girl. The blonde calls the classmate and asks directly if she is the famous Tojo Karen. The redhead questions the girl's identity, and Rika introduces herself formally in the cafeteria. The blonde offers help for the redhead's problems, who gets scared upon hearing her name. The mobster approaches suspiciously and analyzes the blonde's face with a lot of curiosity. Tojo blushes and confesses to having heard rumors that Rika is a genius with love advice. Rika explains that the classmate's problem is obvious since she pursues the hero every day. The mobster panics and covers the blonde's mouth to avoid others overhearing. The blonde pushes her hand away and smiles, claiming she was also dying to talk to her. Rika promises to give the best love advice to help the redhead win the hero over. Later, Yusung walks through the street, reflecting on his classmates' immense excitement. He remembers the blonde scheduled a big meeting between them for the next day. The young man finds it strange. She wants so much to help with a romance that should just be a rivalry. Tired of thinking about the story, he decides to focus on his training and enters a gym. The place is full of bodybuilders, sweating their shirts with intense weightlifting. The big guy hears someone calling his name and turns his head, confused. In the middle of the hall, he is quite surprised to recognize who the girl training in that environment is. The young woman with a ponytail is Fuma Yukika, the feared kendo club captain of the school. Yusung approaches and both comment on the great coincidence of meeting there. The captain explains that the club's activities are not enough for her daily workout. The big guy notices the other men are training hard just to impress the girl. He finds the bodybuilder's attitude understandable since the veteran is very beautiful. Yusung says he didn't know she lived in the area, and the young woman reveals having moved recently. The protagonist cracks a smile, finding the news perfect, and celebrates internally. At that instant, the old gym manager appears, smiling and showing off muscles. The friendly man asks Yusung to guide the veteran since they are from the same school. The old man whispers that the girl only started training there because she likes the big guy. Fuma turns her face, embarrassed, guaranteeing that the director understood the situation totally wrong. All three position themselves in front of a gigantic Olympic bar loaded with big plates. The old man suggests starting the workout light with 485 pounds and scares the veteran. The man laughs, asking her not to worry because Yusung is the biggest monster he has ever seen. The young man is unfazed by the monstrous weight and holds firmly onto the bar with both hands. Using his absurd strength, he performs the perfect squat without any difficulty. The director compliments the ease of the exercise and increases the load to 595 pounds. Yusung finishes 5 series in a row while the captain observes the young man, totally shocked. The old man brags about having warned he was a monster, and Fuma finds this training torture. The kendo captain often observes the big eye sweating and admits that physique is very abnormal for a second-year student. She analyzes the powerful aura emanating from him and has the most absolute certainty that it is the feared extreme yang physique. The girl trembles upon realizing that her schoolmate really possesses the legendary extreme young physique. It is a rare constitution born with the vitality of 100 men and possessed by the great heroes of mythology. The veteran remembers when she faced him in combat and concludes that absurd power wouldn't come just from bodybuilding. Maintaining her seriousness, the club leader decides she will need to report this shocking discovery to a certain person. Time passes and the scene changes to a huge and traditional Japanese mansion on a very sunny day. Yusong and Rika arrive at the location, accompanying the redhead, who is greeted by a group of men in suits. The big guy realizes that Tojo's family really is in the mafia and finds it strange the blonde isn't even a little surprised. The young man sighs, thinking he will never get used to these crazies of having been reincarnated into a manga world. Suddenly, one of the mafia thugs notices Yusung's intimidating presence and goes into complete dread. The suit-wearing man points his finger, accusing the big guy of being an enemy spy, and tells the redhead to get away from the danger. The girl defends her classmates, while the thug insists the big guy has too much bloodlust for a high schooler. Already inside the house, the redhead sincerely apologizes to the protagonist for the exaggerated and rude attitude of her men. Yusung runs his hand through his hair and reassures his classmate, stating he is already quite used to being misinterpreted. The young man warns that he won't be of much help with advice, but Rika disagrees, wanting a male opinion. The blonde suggests starting the training with cooking, guaranteeing that homemade food is the best way to express love. Striking a cute pose, the blonde asks the redhead to trust her and proclaims herself the school's great expert on love. The big guy feels chills, finding the way his partner talks about herself in the third person very embarrassing. Ignoring the awkward atmosphere, the blonde raises her hands excitedly and summons everyone to finally start cooking. After a while, the panning redhead proudly presents a beautiful and well-put-together lunchbox with several side dishes. She lifts the plate, moved by it being her first homemade lunchbox, and the blonde compliments the friend's excellent work. However, the big guy remembers that moments before, the redhead almost set the entire kitchen on fire and burned all the food. Yusung sighs, relieved to have taken control, and reflects that cooking in a romantic comedy is quite dangerous. The blonde smells the good scent and suggests that her classmate prepare something quick for their dinner right there. Confident in his kitchen skills, the big guy cracks a small smile and says to leave everything to him. The young man masters the pans with mastery, creating intense flames while frying the rice with a lot of technique and precision. Both girls observe, completely amazed, his absurd skill controlling the high heat of the stove. The big guy finishes the dish and serves a beautiful, shiny fried rice that draws sighs of admiration from the girls. The duo tastes the meal and is amazed, devouring everything quickly while praising the incredible taste of the food. Curious, the blonde asks since when he cooks so well, and Yusong explains he started at the end of his first year. The big guy reveals he learned to prepare his own lunchbox because he felt sorry for his mother, who woke up at dawn for it. He tells that at the beginning he was awkward, but got the hang of it, and the blonde gets emotional, finding the attitude very cute. Rika jokes with the redhead about ungrateful daughters, revealing that her own mother makes the lunchboxes with a lot of love. Changing the subject, Rika gets scared upon suddenly remembering she brought a special gift for the mobster. The blonde hands over a paper bag, claiming to have gone to the cosmetics store to buy everything her friend would need. She explains that she wrote down a basic skincare routine for the redhead to follow, and the girl thanks her, moved. Rika decrees that they will buy new clothes as soon as the friend learns to apply makeup and gets the long-awaited date. The blonde evaluates the redhead and comments with sincerity that her current fashion style is a big problem. Rika says without mercy that wearing a sports jacket over the uniform makes the classmate look like an old person, and the redhead screams, offended. Yusung smiles, finding the blonde surprisingly frank, and agrees to help with the makeup to guarantee the date. The blonde claps excitedly and tells the redhead to prepare for the makeup while asking the big guy to wait there. The young man questions if he will be alone, and Rika states that watching a woman's transformation would be a great crime. Rika drags the redhead away in a hurry to another room, leaving the big guy alone and confused in the mansion's kitchen. Yusung is left completely lost, trying to understand why the blonde said earlier that the male opinion was important. Later, both walk through the busy streets of the city at night, and the big guy admits the outing was fun. Rika stretches and Yusung wishes sincerely that the redhead finally succeeds in her long, dream date. The girl points to a convenience store and asks to enter quickly because she needs to buy her manga magazine. Already inside the store, Rika flips through the magazine and comments on her father's phrase that there are no bad people among manga fans. Yusung holds his own magazine and smiles, asking jokingly if that also makes him a good person. The blonde girl gets completely embarrassed upon hearing the young man call her a good person. The big guy explains that helping the redhead classmate all day proves her good heart. The blonde blushes intensely upon receiving such a sincere compliment from her classmate. Very shy, she changes the subject, saying it is late, and runs away from the convenience store. Seeing the desperate escape, the protagonist wonders if the girl had a stomach ache. The next day, the sun shines brightly, illuminating the big school building once again. The students in the hallway start to whisper, completely surprised by some news. The redhead mobster appears at school exhibiting a totally new and much cuter look. The students are shocked to finally realize the beautiful girl is the feared redhead. The embarrassed girl extends a sealed envelope directly to the blonde hero in the room. The confused young man thinks it is a challenge letter, but she warns him about their date. Completely blushing, the mobster looks away and screams, asking what he is looking at. Later, the group of friends meets in the busy and famous district of Shibuya. The blonde laughs, remembering that the letter really did seem like a challenge, and the redhead thanks her for the help. Excited, the blonde newcomer suggests that both start calling each other only by their first names. The big guy sighs out of place, feeling that he has entered a totally different world. He remembers he was dragged to the store by the girls to help choose clothes. The girls stop, enchanted, in front of a luxury shop window full of very cute pieces. The blonde pulls her friend quickly into the store, wanting to try on several new clothes. Rika throws a mountain of clothes at her friend, while the big guy just observes everything. The mobster is lost with so many options, and the blonde pushes her straight into the fitting room. The blonde smiles mischievously and asks the protagonist to wait there for a moment. Rika invades the small fitting room, warning her friend to stay quiet and leave everything to her. The big guy hears strange sounds and wonders what kind of absurdity they are doing. The curtain finally opens and the redhead mobster emerges, holding the skirt, very embarrassed. The girl wears a beautiful black and white set, but complains that the skirt is too short. Rika asks for her classmate's opinion, and the young man compliments her with sincerity, saying it looks great. The redhead young woman blushes at the compliment, and the protagonist admires her impressive change. Meanwhile, the atmosphere in the huge Mafia family mansion is extremely tense. A dangerous meeting happens in the dark room, with several thugs surrounding the great leader. The powerful and feared criminal faction leader evaluates the situation with a ruthless look. The famous man known as Bloodbath comments seriously about his daughter. He stabs a giant knife into the table, revealing that the young woman finally likes a boy. The thugs are shocked, and the father confesses, not knowing what kind of trash this boy is. The mobster warns his advisor that he will never hand his daughter over to any bum. The advisor adjusts his glasses and confirms that the boy's name really is Sakamoto Ryuji. The man informs that the blonde studies at the exact same school as the young Harris. He also reports that he had to escort the girl to a beauty salon the day before. The suit-wearing man shows his cell phone, displaying several expensive purchases made at clothing stores. The leader joins the pieces and goes into a rage upon noticing that the daughter is planning a romantic date. date. Dominated by fatherly hatred, the mobster screams the boy's name, swearing to end him. With a death glare, the man summons all the faction members who are off duty. The boss decrees that the great mission will be to spy on the date and prevent any shenanigans. All 8 main mafia executives agree promptly with the absurd plan. Far from all this craziness, the trio of students finally arrives at a nice diner. The blonde collapses at the table, completely exhausted. While the hamburgers are served, the girl grumbles that she doesn't have the strength even to chew. But the big guy eats calmly. The redhead mobster smiles, thanking all the help, and the blonde guarantees that friends are for that. The redhead compliments her partner's loyalty, who returns the smile, saying she had a lot of fun. The redhead offers more snacks to the big guy, but he refuses, saying he prefers to eat rice. The redhead offers more snacks as a way to thank for all the help they gave. The big guy bites his hamburger and reflects that the mobster classmate is actually very kind. The young man warns calmly that the girl's face is dirty with ketchup and she is left dying of embarrassment. Changing the subject, the protagonist asks if the young woman already has a plan for the next day's date. The mobster explains all proud her simple plan involving a coffee, a movie, and a good dinner. Rika is completely indignant at the idea and screams, saying her friend is being too naive. The blonde takes her cell phone, claiming you don't win a man over by acting like everyone else. She shows the screen, revealing the photo of an aquarium, and the redhead is surprised by the unusual suggestion. The expert on romance describes excitedly the beautiful atmosphere with the shining waves and colorful fish. She guarantees that the low lighting of the location is perfect for creating the romantic atmosphere for intimate conversations. The redhead trusts blindly in the counselor alum and accepts the idea while Yusung judges everything in silence. At the end of the day, the blonde says goodbye excitedly, wishing the friend a lot of luck on her romantic date. The girl thanks the counselors once again and follows her own path home. The big guy waves to his classmate and finally prepares to enjoy his long-awaited weekend in peace. But the blonde asks about the young man's plans for the next day, and he confesses he only intends to read. The girl gets excited and invites him to spy on her friend's date, destroying the poor big guy's day off. With eyes on fire, the newcomer forces him to accept the mission, saying they need to guarantee the victory. The young woman slaps his hand, celebrating the great pair of spies, while the young man just accepts the fate. The next day, the great mafia leader arrives at the date location, using a somewhat ridiculous disguise. The man observes the imposing street, dying of jealousy, because that is his little daughter's first date. Shortly after, the blonde protagonist arrives smiling, sincerely apologizing for the small delay. The redhead breaks into a sweet smile and warns shyly that she just arrived at the meeting point. The hero compliments the young woman's cute clothes, and she feels her own heart miss a beat from so much joy. Totally blushing, the girl thanks him for the beautiful compliment while both start walking side by side. The monster proposes that they have a nice tea to start off the long and fun day off well. The young man offers gently to carry the girl's bag without noticing a mysterious stalker watching. Hidden behind the disguised big guy, the blonde celebrates the excellent romantic atmosphere between the lovebirds. The blonde spy runs quickly to continue the pursuit, and the protagonist follows soon after, desperate. The young couple walks happily to the cafe without imagining the huge amount of crazies spying on them both. Observing the scene from afar, the dangerous mafia leader grinds his teeth, foaming with pure anger at the boy. The boss breaks out furiously over the boy's small delay and tries to hold him back to avoid deaths. The advisor warns that the scandal is attracting attention, and the old man doesn't understand how the disguise failed. The suit-wearing man explains that walking in a pack of 9 spies is bizarre and suggests a division into pairs. The leader agrees immediately with the genius strategy and orders his cruel men to start the pursuit. Far from all this confusion, the young couple's beautiful date proceeds perfectly well inside a famous cafe. The waitress serves a gigantic and delicious strawberry ice cream full of sweets, drawing everyone's attention. The blonde spy gets distracted, ordering the same giant dessert, and the big guy doubts she can eat it all alone. The girl brags, saying she can handle the sweet dish calmly until noticing something strange in the environment. The pair of spies looks around and notices an immense amount of scary guys filling all the tables. The big guy notices the heavy atmosphere with so many men in strange suits walking through the crowded place. Sweating cold, the protagonist recognizes the danger and has the absolute gut feeling that those guys are from the mafia. He focuses on the old guy in dark glasses who exudes a tremendous murderous aura in the middle of that quiet cafeteria. The young man recognizes the bizarre disguise and soon concludes that the feared criminal faction came to watch the redhead girl. The tense atmosphere is broken when the blonde hero comments excitedly about the dolphins at the city aquarium. The young protagonist suggests that the great attraction of the dolphins be the starting stop for the adorable outing. With eyes shining with happiness, the redhead states that incredible outing promises to be unforgettable. The big guy disagrees totally, feeling that having the entire mafia on their tail will end in a deadly disaster. Shortly after, the entire gigantic group heads straight for the crowded and noisy train station of the big city. The crowd enters the cars, and the big guy puts his arm around the blonde to protect her from the shoving. The spy blushes upon being stuck to the young man's wide chest while complaining non-stop about the passenger's rudeness. The blonde spy tries to ignore the crowd and blushes upon being stuck so close to the young man's wide chest. The big guy turns his face suddenly, and his partner gets a small fright with the movement. The protagonist reassures his classmate, warning that they are almost reaching their destination. The doors finally open, and the impatient crowd shoves the blonde without any mercy. At that exact instant, the big guy holds the girl's hand with a lot of firmness in the middle of the chaos. Without wasting time, Yoo-sung pulls the blonde through the crowded hallways so they don't get lost. Both finally manage to leave the station, breathless and still holding hands. Rika points to their joined hands, dying of shame, and the young man apologizes right away. The big guy lets go of his classmate's hand gently and tries to recover his posture. The girl turns her face blushing and asks shyly for him to be a little kinder next time. The young man is left totally confused by her speech without understanding the romantic hint. Suddenly, the light turns red and both lose sight of the hero and the redhead in the middle of the intersection. Yoo-sung maintains his calm, guaranteeing they only need to head straight for the aquarium. The problem is that the entire mafia ends up getting stuck on the same sidewalk as both spies. The monsters complain about the crowd, and Yoo-sung turns his face, sweating cold upon noticing their presence. The big guy panics, recognizing the dangerous thugs from the big mansion. The protagonist shrinks and tries to sneak away, so he isn't recognized at all. However, one of the thugs spots the young man from afar and points his finger, recognizing both friends. The suit-wearing man reveals that the big guy helped Tojo at the mansion a few days ago. The old monster deduces that the friends came only to watch the redhead's great date. The advisor suggests following the pair since they lost the Harris in the crowd. The great leader agrees, and the dangerous criminal faction starts pursuing both teenagers. Meanwhile, the redhead and the blonde finally arrive at the city's famous aquarium. The protagonist calls the girl to enter without noticing a group of delinquents nearby. The bully with the neck brace gets a big scare upon spotting the blonde hero at the location. He confirms with his friend that really is the boy from the kendo club incident. The delinquent complains that the blonde caused their expulsion and still has the courage to go on a date. With a wicked smile, the bully swears that this time he will kill the blonde protagonist. Unaware of the danger, both spies invade the aquarium and observe the couple from afar. The big guy notices the romantic lighting hides the details of the outing. Still, he evaluates the date's atmosphere with an extremely analytical look. Yoo-sung concludes, relieved, that the romance is flowing much better than he imagined. The young man asks the blonde spy if they really need to continue spying. Later, the entire group heads for the city park, where the couple will have a picnic. The blonde hero is amazed by the beautiful lunchbox stuffed with kimbap and inari sushi. Rika and Yoo-sung observe the couple from afar, while they also eat at the next table. The blonde chews the food, happy, loving the fun day of spying. Sakamoto compliments the aquarium and the redhead agrees, remembering the beautiful fish. Shortly after, Tojo trembles with pure nervousness, asking the young man to taste her food. Rika notices her friend's tension and Yusing finds it natural as it is the first meal she prepares. The big guy remembers that the girl spent sleepless practicing the dishes without rest. The hero compliments the unbelievable food, asking if it was her herself who prepared everything. Tojo blushes and asks the blonde to start by devouring the rice balls made with a lot of affection. The young man bites the rice ball while the redhead swallows hard, rooting for success. Sakamoto compliments the delicious taste, and the girl widens her eyes from pure happiness. Excited, the redhead picks up another piece with her chopsticks and feeds the hero. The mobster waits for the answer, completely tense and sweating cold on the picnic blanket. The blonde chews the snack quickly, while the girl demands an honest evaluation. The hero makes an approval sign, smiling, and the redhead almost explodes from so much joy. At the other table, Rika plays at feeding the big guy who accepts without complaining. The redhead offers another piece of food to the blonde protagonist who accepts willingly. The hero thanks for the delicious snack but warns, smiling, that he is already quite satisfied for now. The mobster holds her own hands, totally blushing and moved, because everything is working out so well. Rika celebrates the success while the big guy finds it suspicious the date flows so well with her tips. The blonde spy approaches, sighing that she wishes to have a romantic date like that one day too. The protagonist points his finger in shock, questioning the reason for her titling herself the Great Love Guru. Rika laughs, admitting she never dated anyone and got all that knowledge from her manga. The big guy sighs, tired, and warns them to continue the pursuit since the couple will leave there. The blonde girl swings her arms, irritated, guaranteeing that her advice really helped friends. The young couple continues walking calmly through the beautiful park while enjoying the beautiful romantic atmosphere. Hidden behind a tree, the spy evaluates the perfect atmosphere and deduces that the declaration is near. However, the big guy's thoughts are abruptly interrupted by a loud rumble in the park. Both spies look surprised and spot the young couple cornered by that group of delinquents. The bully with the neck brace smiles mischievously, offending the blonde hero in front of the redhead. The delinquent accuses Sakamoto of being an opportunist for walking with another girl besides the kendo leader. Rika wants to call the police, but the big guy decides to act with his own hands if the situation worsens. Sakamoto steps forward with courage, asking if the gang wants to spend another whole month in the hospital. The big guy finally recognizes the marginals as the freshmen kicked out of the martial arts club. The spy remembers those cowards were beaten up by the protagonist after harassing a student. The delinquent cries from anger for having been kicked out of the club, losing the chance to admire his captain. The young mobster girl is completely disgusted by the group's attitude and screams, calling everyone idiots. The redhead points her finger firmly, stating that they deserve the fair expulsion for being disgusting. The marginal observes her face and is surprised to finally recognize the feared mobster in makeup. The bully mocks the girl's radical visual change, just to date a terrible loser. Sakamoto steps forward to protect the scared girl, while the enemies continue mocking her. The blonde hero loses his patience completely and tells the cowards to wash their mouths to speak of his friend. The atmosphere worsens drastically when a huge man with a thug face appears behind the freshman. The gang cracks a relieved smile, calling the blonde brute to end the protagonist soon. The dangerous marginal leader stares at the hero with evil, wanting to punish whoever beat his thugs. The freshmen brag, claiming their leader is a living legend of street fighting in the whole region. Sakamoto begs his partner to run away as fast as possible, but the young woman refuses to leave him alone. The thug leader loses patience with the beautiful romantic drama and warns that the fun has ended for good. Without the slightest pity, the brute advances with everything and grabs the mobster's arm with a lot of violence. The redhead screams, terrified, while the disgusting thug invites her to have fun with real men. The blonde hero is desperate to see his friend being hurt and runs quickly to save her from there. However, the protagonist is surprised by a very brutal punch punch in the stomach and falls defeated on the grass. Seeing that great cowardice, the big guy exudes a murderous aura and tells the blonde to wait for him. Completely in tears, the poor mobster girl screams her fallen friend's name while trying to break free. The cowardly gang mocks the defeated hero on the ground, and the leader decides to take the beautiful redhead girl away. The disgusting man harasses the defenseless girl without noticing an immense shadow approaching behind his back. The big guy stares at the bully with a dark look, and the leader asks who that cursed intruder is. Without saying absolutely anything, Yusung squeezes the criminal's arm until breaking almost all his bones. The protagonist throws the enemy leader far away with extreme ease, scaring all the freshmen. Emanating all his immense power, the big guy warns coldly for them not to touch his friend anymore. The gang sweats cold with terror, with the monstrous pressure, while the humiliated coward starts screaming. The marginal leader accuses the big guy of attacking from behind and promises to end his race in a fistfight. The muscular hero just breathes deeply, revealing a huge, extremely terrifying combat stance. The thug tries to calm down, thinking the rival must just be a huge dumb schoolboy. Far from the fight, the real mafia's advisor questions if the boss will leave that aggression unpunished. Minutes before, the dangerous criminal faction was completely lost in the park looking for the lovebirds. The bespectacled advisor warns, desperately, that he finally found the lovebird couple. The redhead girl tries to break free, while the blonde brute holds her arm by force. The mafia leader is completely furious to see a marginal touching his little daughter. The thug asks if he should take the weapons, but the great boss tells him to wait a bit. The old mobster decides not to intervene upon, seeing that the big guy took the front of the confusion. The criminal leader starts observing the extremely dark aura emanating from the young man's body. The old man has trembling hands while feeling a suffocating pressure in the middle of that park. The mobster swallows hard and realizes he has certainly felt the type of aura before. He remembers the day he stood face to face with the terrible leader of the Russian mafia. The old man remembers feeling the same absolute fear when facing the powerful criminal in the past. He recognizes in the high schooler the same monstrous capable of awakening pure terror. The boss is fascinated by the underworld energy coming from a mere high school student. Meanwhile, Yusung decides to forget the manga script and throws his act away. Dominated by anger, the big guy walks, promising to just throw the enemy trash away. The protagonist tells his friend to take the hero and leave the fight in his hands. The young redhead hesitates, scared, but the big guy guarantees he would never lose to them. The blonde thug screams furiously for being completely ignored by the newcomer. The marginal attacks quickly, but Yusung defends the enemy punch with extreme ease. The freshmen celebrate, believing the leader's fists are too fast to dodge. The brute launches several blows, mocking the big guy for failing to dodge, but he soon gets desperate upon noticing the opponent endures the blows without blinking. Furious with the absurd resistance, the thug is to attack with all his remaining strength. The marginal leader lands a direct punch that hits the big guy's head full force. The blonde spy goes into complete panic, fearing for the life of her great friend and partner. The blonde hero is perplexed while the redhead screams desperately the big guy's name. Yusung remains motionless and the thug sweats cold, retreating in front of that terrifying aura. Maintaining his composure, the big guy decrees that from now on it is legitimate self-defense. The thug barely has time to react before receiving the violent and brutal counter-attack. Yusung lands a devastating punch that illuminates the park with the absurd impact of the blow. The big guy remembers that legitimate self-defense usually only allows hitting back with one blow. The marginal's body flies through the air and falls brutally to the ground, scaring all the thugs. Yusung confesses he bet everything on this single blow not to be accused of using force. The freshmen go into despair, while the big guy grumbles, finding the fight boring. With his face bleeding, the monster warns that hurting his friends has a very expensive price. The coward threatens to call the police, bragging that his father is an important man. The big guy finds the threat cheap and promises to fix the delinquent's rotten head. Squeezing the young man's head firmly, he makes the marginal cry, begging for mercy. The protagonist throws the coward's body to the ground without the slightest difficulty or compassion. The gang kneels, sweating with dread, while crying and begging the school monster for forgiveness. Yu-sung orders them to disappear and never appear in front of the hero or the young redhead again. The freshmen run away, terrified, while the blonde spy runs in the direction of the big guy. Partner screams desperately, and the protagonist pretends that nothing very serious happened. The girl gets annoyed with his stubbornness and demands they go quickly to the pharmacy. Yu-sung agrees, scared, because it's the first time he sees the sweet partner so furious. Later, the group moves away and observes the hero and the redhead sitting on a park bench. The pair of spies feels the tense atmosphere and decides to give the friends some privacy. The monster girl apologizes, believing to be the one to blame for all that confusion. Sakamoto takes the blame, remembering the gang was after him from the beginning. Silence takes over the place until the young redhead calls out the protagonist's name. Gathering all her courage, the mobster finally confesses her feelings for the hero. The blonde hero is tense without knowing how to handle the situation and asks for caution. He continues in silence while the young woman blushes and catches her breath to speak. With shining eyes, the mobster finally asks her friend to date her. Sakamoto lowers his head with a heavy expression without knowing how to react. The girl gets sad and the hero apologizes right after and rejects her. The redhead goes into despair, guaranteeing she can try to change her rude way for him. The young woman tries to argue while he confesses having an old childhood promise. The hero reveals with seriousness that he promised marriage to a great friend. Until he finds the girl, he warns he doesn't intend to date anyone. The rejection hurts the redhead deeply, who is left with her head down, holding back tears. She cries hidden, and the young man admits he also cried when his friend left. The young woman asks, crying, if that old friend from the past was his first love. He confirms firmly, and the young woman decides to give up on him with honor and dignity. With a beautiful fake smile, the redhead says goodbye, saying the date was incredible. The hero agrees somewhat awkwardly, noting she is suffering in silence. The mobster turns her back and runs desperately, wanting only to escape that humiliation. The pair of spies watches the friends escape, completely shocked and hands tied. The hero grumbles alone about the rejection and says goodbye sadly towards his own path. Completely shaken, the blonde partner reflects sadly on the love situation. The big guy tries to console his friend, but runs away suddenly in the redhead's direction. The rejected girl can't run anymore and cries alone at a small bus stop. Yi-sung approaches quickly and asks with concern if the young mobster is okay. The redhead sheds tears without stopping, destroyed by Sakamoto's harsh romantic rejection. The big guy notices the girl's pain and offers a tissue for her to wipe her face. The young man reprimands the young woman, telling her to stop pretending to be strong in such a fragile moment. She grumbles, saying she never cried in front of anyone before while wiping her tears. The redhead thanks him for the concern and keeps staring at nothing, trying to organize her thoughts. She asks since when they were spying on her because she was already suspicious of the pair's actions. The big guy sweats cold in silence, trying to think of a lame excuse. The spy tries to justify himself, saying it wasn't from the beginning, while the girl stares at him. The redhead ignores the lie and vents, blaming herself for the terrible rejection. The girl realizes depressed that the blonde hero never showed real interest in her. She puts her hand on her chest and admits the terrible pain of rejection seems to tear her apart inside. The young woman cries, feeling that all that teenage passion is suffocating her inside. The girl falls into tears, finally confessing that her love for the hero was real. The big guy is stunned and sad, realizing the emotions of those heroes are real. Yu-sung understands he always treated the girls as simple manga characters without life. The young man realizes that even Rika demonstrates real pain despite the sweet personality. But the redhead's crying proves those people truly live inside the school universe. Taking an attitude, the big guy stands up and calls the redhead young woman firmly. The mobster cleans her face, confused, and the big guy threatens to call the police on that crybaby. The redhead young woman lets out a light laugh, finding the spy friend's so exaggerated threat fun. The young man celebrates, saying the annoying young woman finally stopped lamenting like a child. Without wasting time, the protagonist takes off his own coat in a quick and surprising movement. The young man hands over the huge jacket and demands the young woman wear the piece immediately. He says they are both leaving right now, and the girl widens her eyes, confused. Without giving a chance, the big guy puts the huge hood over the girl's head. The protagonist ignores the friend's grumbles and summons her for an outing together. The girl lowers her head, embarrassed by the sudden brutal kindness of Yusung. The big guy decides to console his friend by running with her through the streets of the big city. The redhead breaks into a beautiful and sincere smile while wearing the big blue hood. The dangerous mafia leader cries with emotion upon seeing that his daughter found such a good friend. The boss watches both walking together and compliments the big guy's good heart. The proud father smiles, imagining the muscular young man would be a perfect son-in-law. The mobster roots internally to cross the student's path in the future. After all the confusion, the redhead takes out her sadness by singing loudly at the karaoke. The big guy is left completely exhausted and without energy after being forced to sing. The scene changes, revealing Rika all excited, invading the protagonist's room at his house. The blonde is surprised by the training equipment, and he covers up the bizarre situation. The curious girl notices some heavy dumbbells fallen on the room's wooden floor. She tries to lift one of the weights with all her strength, but the object doesn't even move. The young man sighs and explains that the weights have practically half her body weight. He remembers everything started when they walked together to the subway station. At that moment, the blonde's stomach growled very loudly, denouncing strong hunger. The young man asked if she was hungry, and the girl was left dying of shame. He offered food at his family's restaurant, and she accepted the idea right away. The big guy smiled gently, thinking a simple meal wouldn't be a problem. Both students headed straight for the small restaurant of Yusung's family. The blonde devoured the plates with scary gusto, while the young man ate in peace. She broke into a giant and extremely radiant smile after savoring that whole banquet. The girl complimented the food, and the protagonist's mother loved seeing the visitor's voracious appetite. The kind woman offered more food to the young woman, who accepted with a lot of joy. Drinking water, the young man soon realized that his mother really liked the blonde girl. Suddenly, the newcomer tapped on the classmate's back and called him to go elsewhere. The protagonist got a huge scare and asked where they would go so suddenly. Winking with a lot of charm, the young woman warned she would go upstairs to see his room. Back to the present, the young man sighs, holding a tray with iced coffee for the visitor. He enters the room offering the drink, but realizes the partner found a secret. The girl smiles mischievously upon discovering his immense secret collection of manga. The student sweats cold with the provocation and fries his brain to invent a good excuse. The blonde laughs, claiming it is just a joke while he hands over the sweet drink. She finds a very special edition and asks if the classmate is a fan of that famous work. The young man confirms, excited, and the blonde is left with her eyes shining with pure happiness. The girl goes into absolute shock upon noting the big guy possesses the rare first editions. Yusung compliments the wonderful art, guaranteeing that manga is a true masterpiece. Hearing such sincere compliments leaves the blonde student absolutely amazed. The big guy loses his posture and talks non-stop about the incredible details of the story. The young woman states that her father will be radiant with joy upon hearing so many compliments like that. She finally reveals that her father himself is the great author of that legendary manga. The young man goes into absolute shock upon discovering he is a classmate of his greatest idol's daughter. He connects the dots and realizes both really share the exact same surname. The protagonist feels stupid for not having noticed that classic cliché of romances. He panics, remembering he got to visit the girl's mansion during the holiday. Dominated by the fan's spirit, he begs for the great chance to get an autograph. The big guy cries male tears of emotion, feeling he beat life as a fan. The blonde raises her hand adorably and warns she has a simple curiosity. The girl asks the reason for him preferring precisely that work in the middle of so many others. The protagonist scratches his chin, inventing that the story grew in his heart out of nowhere. The partner smiles with sweetness and starts, remembering a great event of the 5th volume. She highlights how the blonde hero of the work always puts loved friends first. The girl remembers the exact moment when the big guy protected the friend with fury. She admires how the big guy manages to be extremely strong and kind. Rika hugs the book happy, comparing his attitudes with those of the hero. The next day, the sun illuminates the big school building once again. The big guy visits the student council room and talks to the president. The black-haired girl remembers he promised to help her during the holiday. She explains the school will receive exchange students from a Russian school. The young man realizes quickly that the president wants help to choose a gift. The president points her finger, very excited, and confirms the classmate's deduction. Yusung accepts the request and suggests they meet on the first day of the recess. Hiding her face, the young woman celebrates and warns that she won't forgive him if he misses it. After being dismissed, the big guy finds the girl's sudden good mood strange. The young man decides to ask the blonde to postpone their commitment for the next day. Back in the classroom, a classmate approaches to tell a big piece of gossip. The friend remembers the confusion with the troublemaker freshman from the kendo club. He finds it bizarre that the marginals have requested a school transfer out of nowhere. Yusung gives a light smile and states the bullies must have their own reasons. The big guy thinks it's great that the cowardly pair doesn't bother his friends anymore. Soon, the new English teacher enters the class, smiling and complaining about the delay. The beautiful woman tells everyone to sit and open the textbooks immediately. The teacher points to the board and asks a question about fruit prices. The big guy wakes Rika with small taps, while the girl mutters the right answer. Teacher Mizuki warns that she will draw a student by the number of the day of the month. The classmate in front of Yusung freezes, with dread upon hearing number 24. The friend points, relieved. The big guy who is called to read the text. Yusung stands up calmly and reads the English sentences, asking for a recommendation. The teacher swallows hard and asks, nervous, what the ideal answer would be. The young man recommends the city of Osaka for being a very famous tourist place. Mizuki trembles, pale, with the answer, and the student doesn't understand her bizarre reaction. The teacher claps her hands in an exaggerated way, complimenting his perfect answer. Yusung sits confused, realizing the woman seems to hate his presence there. The woman continues the class sweating cold and stuttering in front of the whole class. Mizuki fumbles with words while holding the chalk with a lot of insecurity. The big guy observes the scene, confirming his worst suspicions about the woman. He realizes the new teacher is dying of dread of teaching him. Walking through the hallway, the student remembers the absurd rumors about his past. The students retreat, terrified, and the young man notes that the level of terror is bizarre. Stopping in front of the teacher's room, he decides to act as normally as possible. Inside, the teacher reads the boy's flawless file, doubting that perfection. Shaken, she starts creating absurd theories that he plans to assassinate her. Suddenly, a big scary shadow completely covers the teacher. Yusung opens the door, introducing himself politely, and the woman screams in dread. Mizuki tries to mask the fear, and the young man realizes his effort didn't help at all. The big guy sighs, accepting that his dark look will always cause panic. He approaches, warning that he came for mandatory career counseling. The teacher forces a very tense smile and asks the student to sit down. Mizuki asks quickly what the boy's plans for the future are. He doesn't know what to answer, and the teacher deduces he will take over the family business. The woman sees the boy as a feared Yakuza leader and trembles with dread. The teacher asks the parents' profession, and he reveals they are owners of a restaurant. The teacher finds the information odd and asks if something is wrong. Relieved, she smiles and says she would love to visit the place sometime. The woman asks what his favorite subjects are, and the young man chooses esteem. The counselor suggests this STEM field, but the student completely disagrees with the idea. Mizuki is left completely speechless by the big guy's mature response. With a determined look, Yu-sung states that he only wants to do what he loves. The teacher agrees, while the young man looks back on his past struggles with engineering. The woman confesses that she didn't always want to be a teacher, making the student pretty curious. Feeling super embarrassed, she asks the young man to promise not to laugh at her old dream. With a shy smile, the counselor reveals that she really wanted to be a voice actress. The young woman remembers falling in love with an anime character back in middle school. However, back then, her old teacher warned her that hobbies could wait for the future. The old advisor suggested that the girl get a stable, secure job first. Mizuki followed the advice, thinking it really was the most obvious choice to make. But once she got to college, she bitterly regretted giving up on her dream. The teacher regrets changing her entire future based on such simple advice. Smiling gently, she asks the young man to think very carefully about his future. The big guy listens in silence to the sincere advice of someone much older and more experienced. The woman smiles radiantly and asks if the big guy got the message. The student offers his heartfelt thanks for that wonderful life advice. Suddenly, an older teacher approaches, bringing up the crazy rumors about the big guy. The man mentions the gossip that the giant took down a whole biker gang all by himself. Mizuki immediately defends her student, stating that all those rumors are lies. The teacher beams with pride as she calls the big guy a caring student. The older teacher gets embarrassed and agrees that one shouldn't judge based on looks alone. Time passes, and the long-awaited holiday finally arrives in the bustling city of Tokyo. The big guy arrives super early at the meeting spot and waits for his partner. Looking around, he spots the beautiful student, council president, walking his way. The protagonist waves, but the girl yells angrily, complaining about him supposedly being late. The president furiously points her finger, wanting to know if the big guy even checked the time. The student is left completely speechless by the wealthy young woman's sudden fury. The young man shows his phone screen, proving there are still 10 minutes left before their meetup. Completely blushing over her mistake, the girl turns her face away and decides to let it slide. As an apology, the president points to a shop and demands a matcha ice cream. The big guy grumbles, questioning the unfair punishment, and the girl trembles with pure rage. Without the slightest mercy, the annoyed young woman lands a sharp, heavy chop to her classmate's head. With a huge bump on his head, the young man pays for the treat, while the president smiles with satisfaction. The black-haired girl happily enjoys her treat while walking alongside her classmate. The student points out that they are walking aimlessly and asks about the gift shop. The young woman hides her panic over forgetting the plan and tells her classmate to follow her quickly. Right at that tense moment, a discreet little earpiece flashes in her ear. A hidden voice quickly gives her the address of a great craft shop nearby. The mysterious voice also advises the girl to show off her feminine charms a lot more. The spies are the president's family butler and maid, keeping tabs on the entire date. Once inside the shop, the two run into a massive, luxurious golden Buddha statue. The big guy suggests the statue as a joke, and the salesman praises the young man's excellent taste. The president boasts about her refined taste, while Yu-sung trembles at the $1 million price tag. The shop owner starts showing off more expensive treasures, majorly startling the rich girl. The maid scolds her through the earpiece, giving the president a fright right in the middle of the shop. The girl whispers, asking the maid to lower her voice, while the big guy watches. The maid lectures her through the earpiece, reminding her that they are there on a romantic date. The disguised servant warns her that her partner is bored and playing on his phone right behind her. The advisor states that the #1 rule is not to bore your partner, and the girl angrily agrees. Trying to fix the mood, the president grabs the young man's jacket sleeve and says she forgot something. She quickly drags the big guy away, ignoring the shop owner, who is crying over the incredibly expensive statue. Once outside, the protagonist notices his partner's haste and asks if everything is okay. The young man gently touches his classmate's shoulder, asking if something is wrong with her. The girl hides her red face behind her fan and makes up an excuse that she just got a little dizzy. The voice in the earpiece praises her acting and orders them to head straight to a traditional clothing store. Guided by the mysterious voice, the young couple soon arrives in front of a beautiful Japanese clothing shop. The saleswoman shows off a dark outfit, guaranteeing it is perfect for impressing exchange students. The wealthy president asks for the young man's opinion, and he checks out the clothing very carefully. Frustrated with the simple outfit, the girl demands that the saleswoman show them the best clothes in the entire store. The woman smiles confidently, her eyes burning with pure determination to make the sale. She displays a stunning white kimono, and the big guy shudders when he sees the absurd price tag on that piece. The girl approves of the fabric's beauty, but calmly asks to look at other available options in the shop. The wealthy young woman rejects several outfits in a row, stating that none of them fit her style. A lot of time passes with various clothes scattered across the counter, without the girl being able to make up her mind. In the end, the brutal dilemma comes down to just a dark kimono and a beautiful floral yukata. The friendly saleswoman suggests that the young woman try on both outfits to make the big choice easier. The girl asks what her classmate thinks, and he agrees that trying on the outfits would be a good idea. Excited, the woman leads the rich girl to the back of the shop to start trying on the clothes. Away from prying eyes, the saleswoman suddenly pulls off her own face, revealing it was a mask. The president gets a massive fright upon discovering that the woman is actually her maid, Manami. The servant smiles innocently and states that she would do absolutely anything for her young mistress. Manami reveals she is a skilled ninja and confesses to temporarily taking the shop owner's place. The young woman realizes that the idea to try on the clothes was part of the plan to show off her charms. The ninja eagerly steps forward to help her mistress change clothes, while the rich girl panics out of sheer embarrassment. In the waiting area, the big guy hears a strange scream and wonders what is taking so long. Suddenly, the click of the doorknob catches the young man's attention, and he quickly looks up from his phone. The boy is met with the beautiful sight of his classmate's long hair styled with a flower hairpin. Yu-sung is completely mesmerized, and his face blushes intensely as he admires the girl's beauty. Wearing a spectacular dark kimono, the president very shyly asks him what he thinks of the outfit. The big guy completely loses his words and stares at her in silence for a few long seconds. Breaking into a cold sweat and still very embarrassed, the young man finally manages to find his voice. He praises the girl with total sincerity, saying she looks absolutely stunning in the outfit. With a gentle and warm look, the young man smiles, stating that the style really suits her. The president goes back to laughing arrogantly and boasts about her beauty, while the young man applauds. Thrilled with the success, the rich young woman announces she is going to try on the yukata and tells him to wait. The girl runs back into the fitting room and quickly shuts the door to be alone. Away from the young man's eyes, she holds her red face, feeling her heart racing. The president is completely melted by the sincere compliment, not knowing how to handle the situation. Later, the young couple walks through the streets, drawing the attention of all the curious bystanders. The rich girl struts stunningly alongside the big guy, radiating an aura of pure beauty. She notices the admiring glances and celebrates that the date is yielding perfect results. Satisfied with the outing, the president suggests they look for a good place to grab lunch together. Right at that moment, the loud sound of a camera shutter echoes right behind the young couple. Yu-sung turns his head around, startled, looking for the source of the sound, and finds two guys in suits hugging. The disguised henchmen pretend to take a selfie, and the big guy concludes it was nothing serious. Yu-sung starts walking again, while the pair of henchmen continues spying on the date in secret. The disguised vice president takes off his sunglasses and notes out of breath that they almost got caught. The young man grumbles, complaining that the big guy has absolutely no idea how lucky he is. Manami asks her partner not to let that resentment show in front of their young mistress. Soon after, the mood shifts as they arrive at the entrance of a modest traditional restaurant. Yu-sung smiles excitedly and introduces the place as his favorite spot to eat ramen. The president agrees to check out the menu, but notes that she will need to use the restroom first. Right at that same moment, the vice president feels a terrible sharp pain in his stomach. The young man in the suit breaks into a cold sweat and confesses to his partner that he isn't feeling very well. He quickly deduces that the massive ice cream he devoured earlier did a number on his stomach. Unable to hold back the pain any longer, the spy apologizes and runs desperately toward the restroom. Minutes later, the young man steps out of the restroom, sighing with total relief after saving himself. However, he gets a fright that nearly stops his heart when he comes face to face with the big guy standing right there. Yusun widens his eyes in shock upon recognizing the student council vice president right there. The wealthy girl returns from the restroom smiling and gently announces that she is finally back. But she goes into complete shock upon seeing the two spies standing right next to her partner. The big guy smiles innocently and explains that he ran into the two upperclassmen right there by pure coincidence. Seung states that he decided to treat them to a meal to thank them for the help he always receives from them. The president trembles with rage, trying to understand why those idiots ruined the entire disguise. Left with no choice, she forces a smile and invites the two spies to eat all together. The unusual group sits down at the table, while the rich young woman cries internally over her ruined date. Manami whispers an apology and explains that her idiot brother bumped in the big guy. The tense silence is broken when a delicious, steaming bowl of ramen is served. The president stares at the popular dish in surprise, and the big guy notices her curious reaction. Confused, the young man asks if this is the rich girl's first time eating a bowl of ramen. The vice president flips out silently, thinking the question is absurd for someone of high nobility. The young woman tries the noodles, and the two classmates anxiously ask if the meal is to her liking. With blushing cheeks, the president declares with delight that the flavor of the dish is absolutely delicious. The big guy smiles with relief at the response while the girl continues enjoying her food. The vice president tries to steal the rest of the meal, but Manami stops him quite aggressively. After the meal, the lively group of students decides to visit a large arcade in the city. The arcade machine's metal claw fails miserably, letting a cute teddy bear drop. The vice president consoles the young woman and promises to use his skills to secure her dream prize. A short time later, things heat up during an intense match of a very famous fighting game. The vice president celebrates his crushing victory at the arcade and mocks the defeated big guy. Yusung becomes furious over being provoked so arrogantly and decides to retaliate. The spy smiles confidently, swearing to punish his classmate for stealing his beloved mistress's attention. Emitting a dark aura, the big guy notes that he still has credits left and challenges his rival to a rematch. Without a shred of mercy, the protagonist obliterates his opponent in the game, scoring a perfect knockout. The guy in the suit goes into shock over the humiliating defeat, while the big guy laughs in his face. Biting his lips in pure frustration, the vice president adjusts his glasses and refuses to accept the loss. The young man yells out the big guy's name, and Yusung turns his head, confused by the sudden call. The spy points to the punching machine, swearing to settle the rivalry using physical strength. The big guy thinks it's a terrible idea, remembering that settling things with fists is pretty primitive. The vice president ignores the warning and starts unbuttoning his shirt right in the middle of the arcade. Ripping his clothes open, he displays an extremely shredded six-pack, shocking the big guy with the sight. The upperclassman laughs at his surprise and displays his hidden muscles with immense pride. Manami and the president hide their faces, dying of embarrassment over their ally's pathetic behavior. Confident in his physique, the upperclassman strikes a fighting stance while the big guy tries to decline. The spy dramatically takes off his sunglasses and asks if his opponent is too scared. Yusung just glares back with a deathly stare as a terrifying aura radiates from his body. The vice president shows off his toned body and taunts the big guy, saying he doesn't look like someone who runs from challenges. With a sly smile and surrounded by flames, the guy in the suit tells the big guy to pay close attention to his power. The spy lets out a resounding battle cry and throws his fist against the machine with all the strength he has. The fast, powerful blow strikes the punching machine's target, creating a massive impact right in the middle of the arcade. The machine lights up, registering an incredible 960 points, and the girls celebrate the new record. The upperclassman points his finger arrogantly, calling out the big guy while a crowd gathers to watch. The rich girl says she is curious about her classmate's strength and tells him to give it his all, promising to pay if it breaks. The big guy cries internally, trying to make sense of this madness, but ends up giving in to the pressure and accepts the challenge. He cracks his knuckles, sighing in frustration because he has absolutely no clue how he ended up caught in this mess. Protagonist evaluates the situation seriously, concluding that the final score isn't the real problem here. The big problem is that his body has an absurd upgrade from being the classic comedy powerhouse trope. Exuding a monstrous aura, he fears that a single serious punch might shatter the machine into 1,000 pieces. With his eyes glowing intensely, the young man realizes he can't hold back and decides to use all his power. The big guy charges forward with a devastating attack, wanting to smash the equipment in the most spectacular way possible. The violent punch hits the target, generating a colossal explosion of energy that lights up the entire gaming hall. The vice president gulps and watches the grand impact, completely astounded by such raw power. The ninja panics upon noticing that the brutal strike bent the steel structure instead of hitting the pad. The rich girl hides her face in utter disbelief when the equipment's display flashes, registering a terrible 0 points. The pair of spies mocks the big guy's terrible aim, while he backs away in silence, totally disappointed. The young man tries to look on the bright side and feels relieved that he didn't set the arcade's highest score. However, a very strange sound of tearing metal echoes from the machine. Catching the startled young man's attention, the main pad detaches completely from the structure and slams onto the floor, creating a huge crash in the room. All the students fall into complete silence, just staring at the broken piece, lying right in the middle of the floor. Sweating in terror at the monster's brute strength, the guy in the suit adjusts his glasses and declares a technical tie. The spy makes an empty threat, and the big guy scratches his head, relieved to have made it out of another mess alive. After so much madness at the arcade, the lively group of students ends up stopping in front of a photo booth. The big guy takes advantage of the gathering and suggests they all step inside the booth to take some souvenir photos. The rich girl is completely charmed by the unique idea and agrees that the activity sounds like fun. The big guy amiably nudges all his classmates inside the small, cramped photo booth. The flash goes off, lighting up the booth, while the group flashes big smiles to capture that beautiful moment. The machine prints out the stickers, revealing hilarious images of all of them wearing cute headbands and funny glasses. The rich girl admires the beautiful pictures, while the vice president grumbles about having his eyes closed. With a warm smile on her face, the young, noble woman ignores the complaints and admits that the whole thing was amazing. The protagonist smiles, proud of the mission's success, and suggests they finish the night singing at a karaoke bar. The spy in the suit belts it out into the microphone, singing with wild passion and getting some good laughs. Right after, the rich girl takes the stage, shining under the lights, while singing in a sweet and elegant way. The wonderful mood reaches its peak when the president, the big guy, share the mic for a beautiful duet. The long day of fun comes to an end, and the big guy says goodbye, wishing everyone a safe trip home. The rich girl says thanks for the amazing outing from inside her luxury car, while her servants pass out from exhaustion. Regaining their senses a bit, the pair of spies realizes with horror that they ended up having way too much fun. The servants apologize to their young mistress, taking the blame for ruining her long-awaited romance. The duo in suits laments missing any chance to slip away during the day to leave the lovebirds alone. The president listens to her subordinates' desperate apologies, keeping a totally serene expression on her face. The young woman breaks the tension of the moment by flashing a surprisingly warm smile filled with pure affection. She reassures the two loyal servants, guaranteeing that their presence made the day infinitely more fun. The girl looks back in wonder at the amazing experience of anxiously waiting for her first shared sweet treat. She remembers the free laughter and good conversations while trying on beautiful clothes at the traditional Japanese shop. Looking at the photos with great fondness, the young woman admits that all those new experiences made her immensely happy. The noblewoman emotionally confesses that she hadn't had this much fun alongside her two faithful friends since her sweet childhood. With her heart overflowing with joy, the leader thanks the servants for never leaving her side at any moment. The young president smiles very gently and sincerely thanks them for the great day together. The vice president and the disguised ninja are deeply moved, with tears welling up in their eyes. The two subordinates cry out of pure happiness, swearing to serve their young mistress for their entire lives. The rich girl asks them to help out properly next time, and the duo excitedly accepts the request. The luxury van speeds off down the streets while the spies shout, promising to make the next date a success. Elsewhere, a man with his hair tied back works focused, drawing on a graphics tablet. The blonde newcomer, Rika, suddenly opens the studio door and calls out to her dad with a huge smile. The girl reminds her dad about her friend's visit the next day, and he reassures her that he didn't forget. The man flashes a very excited smile, confessing that he is also looking forward to this big visit. He can't wait to finally meet the famous Kim, using that his daughter talks about so much at home. On the second day of the holiday, the big guy finally arrives at Rika's house to keep his promise. The protagonist is frozen and breaking into a cold sweat out of pure nervousness in front of his blonde classmate's dad. Yu-sung bows out of respect, and the author finds it funny that he looks like an old school manga hero. The student is completely marveled to be face to face with his biggest life idol. The big guy sees Rika's dad as the true, legendary supreme god of shonen manga. The author invites the young fan inside, letting him know that his wife prepared a special welcome. Rika's beautiful mom smiles excitedly and calls everyone to eat quickly before the food gets cold. The big guy is blown away by the massive, luxurious feast spread across the entire dinner table. The group gathers around the table and gives thanks for the wonderful meal before starting to eat. The author mentions that Rika has been talking nonstop about Yu-sung lately, giving the young man a major fright. The man smiles, revealing that it's the first time his daughter has gotten this close to a boy from school. The protagonist breaks into a cold sweat and fries his brain, trying to think of a way to clear up that misunderstanding. Yu-sung stammers that they are just regular friends, and Rika tells him to stop talking while he eats. The mom tries to calm things down, but the author admits that any dad would get protective over his daughter. The big guy reflects on the situation and internally agrees with that doting father's intense protectiveness. He concludes that if he had a beautiful daughter like Rika, he would think all guys were big bad wolves. The blonde newcomer dies of embarrassment and scolds her parents for saying so many embarrassing things. Yu-sung observes his classmate in silence, noticing how incredibly nervous she is with the whole situation. Rika notices his gaze and turns her face away blushing, while her dad watches the scene with a smile. The girl panics, demanding that everyone stop making suspicious comments during lunch. The author laughs alongside his wife and proudly comments on how fast their daughter grew up and is turning into a woman. With a nostalgic look, the man confesses that deep down, he wished she could stay a kid forever. He fondly remembers the days when little Rika would run around the house holding a toy bunny. In the memory, the adorable little girl innocently promised that she would marry her dad when she grew up. Returning to the present, the author breaks the silence and mentions he heard the boy is a huge fan of his. The man invites the young man to see his manga studio, and Yu-sung accepts the offer instantly. The big guy follows his classmate, celebrating the golden opportunity to score an autograph from his idol. The blonde girl guides her classmate through the hallways, proudly stating that her dad is the artist she respects most. Suddenly, the girl opens a door and shows off her neatly arranged room to her visiting classmate. Yu-sung steps into the room and is surprised to notice that the place looks like an actual manga library. The blonde lets him know she is going to grab some snacks and asks the big guy to wait there for a moment. Before closing the door, she threatens to get furious if he tries to touch her things without permission. Left alone, the big guy sits on the floor, feeling a bit awkward since it's his first time in a girl's bedroom. To shake off the confusing thoughts, the young man pulls out his phone, deciding to play a quick game. However, the door suddenly opens, and Rika's mom appears in the room smiling, startling the young man. He calls her mom out of politeness, but the beautiful woman smiles and asks to be called just Maria. The young man puts his phone away, and the woman playfully reveals she came to show off her daughter's past. Maria displays Rika's childhood photo album with an excited smile, ready to share some secrets. The woman shows old baby photos, while the young man hesitates, feeling it's pretty wrong to invade her privacy. Yu-sung goes into a complete state of shock when Maria mentions an old photo of her daughter at an otaku event. The mom reveals she used to be a cosplayer and jokes that her daughter inherited that side of her. Excited, the beautiful woman finds the actual photo of her daughter's dark past, shocking the big guy. The image reveals little Rika wearing a highly detailed gothic outfit and sporting an eye patch. Right at that moment, the young blonde walks into the room and widens her eyes, completely horrified. Trembling with embarrassment, the girl asks if her mom showed him the photo, and the woman happily confirms it. The blonde screams in pure agony, while the young man smiles awkwardly, noticing his classmate's otaku side. Desperate, the girl shakes her friend, guaranteeing that it was just a terrible, passing phase. Maria finds it funny and leaves the room, leaving the two alone while her daughter yells angrily at her. With the door closed, the blonde drops to her knees, totally defeated by the humiliation in front of the young man. She begs him to keep this a secret, and Yu-sung agrees, reminding her that he doesn't have any other friends anyway. The young woman looks up with teary eyes, completely crushed by so much embarrassment. Seeing his friend's sadness, the big guy smiles gently, telling her not to feel so bad. He explains that everyone goes through an edgy phase, but the blonde doubts he ever did. Scratching his face, the student shyly confesses that he was also pretty weird back in middle school. To prove it, the big guy grabs his phone and asks if the girl wants to see a photo from back then. The young man quickly finds the old picture in his gallery, and the blonde leans in, highly curious. He hands over the device, revealing the image, and the girl widens her eyes, letting out a shocked gasp. Completely stunned, the blonde stares at the phone screen, unable to believe what she is seeing. The photo reveals a scrawny young kid covered in fake tattoos, striking a super dramatic pose. She hands back the phone, wanting to know how such a skinny nerd ended up getting giant like that. Smiling, the young man explains that he started training hard because he felt weak, and then he hit a growth spurt. The blonde jokes about his past, and Yu-sung asks if she doesn't like his current version. Super flustered, the girl confesses without thinking that she really likes him exactly the way he is. She realizes her accidental confession and slaps a hand over her mouth, completely red from so much embarrassment. The big guy flashes a very gentle smile and calls his partner's name with a lot of affection. His heart races as he slowly steps closer to the young blonde sitting on the bedroom floor. In a total panic, the blonde pushes her friend back, shouting desperately that she sees him only as a good friend. The protagonist backs off, hiding his frustration, and stammers in agreement about them just being great friends. The girl forces a very nervous laugh, repeating the same excuse to try and break the ice. Regaining his composure, the big guy calls out to his classmate again, and she answers, still paying close attention to him. The young man sincerely thanks her for the invitation, which allowed him to meet his ultimate manga idol. The blonde blushes, stating that she will cherish this day in her memory and thanks her classmate for all his help. With a charming smile, the protagonist guarantees that his partner will always be welcome at his house. The mood becomes light and pleasant again as the young blonde promises to visit him more often. Time flies by, and a beautiful orange evening finally takes over the city skies. Now, outside the mansion, the young man declines the invitation to stay, letting her know he needs to head home for dinner. The blonde remembers that the boy's family is going on a trip the next day, and he confirms the destination. She wishes him a good trip, while the young man jokes that they will go a whole long week without seeing each other. Worried, the big guy tells her to call if she needs any help, but the blonde laughs at the distance. The protagonist imagines himself swimming across the ocean and believes his physique could handle the job. Giving up on the crazy idea, he promises to just buy a plane ticket, and the blonde finds his cuteness funny. The newcomer waves happily, saying goodbye to her partner and wishing him a good return to classes. The young man flashes a very sincere smile illuminated by the sunset and agrees with his partner. A flashback appears, showing the blonde surprised to find out that she lived very close to her classmate. Another memory shows the two friends eating kimbap together on a quiet bench in a city park. The girl reflects on all the massive effort the young man made to help their redhead friend on her date. She concludes that someone so protective and caring toward his classmates is definitely a very good person. The big guy protects his classmate in the middle of the tight crowd, telling her to hang on tight. In the middle of the chaos, the young man firmly holds the girl's hand so they don't lose each other at all. Back in the present, the young blonde blushes while watching the big guy walk down the sunlit streets. The story moves forward to the 5th day of the holiday in the bustling town of Akihabara. Yusung walks peacefully down the street, happy to have bought all the manga he needed. Satisfied with his purchases, the big guy decides to look for a good place to grab a bite. The student calmly ponders whether he should visit his favorite ramen restaurant. Suddenly, a blue-haired girl appears, yelling at him to get out of her way. The mysterious young woman takes an incredible leap, passing right over the startled big guy. A flash reveals the flying girl's undergarments, while she demands silence. Yusung takes a direct hit to the face and is left totally confused by the absurd situation. The young man gets a nosebleed and questions if this is that famous rom-com logic. Annoyed by his bleeding nose, the big guy scoops the girl up into his arms firmly. The young woman complains about the young man's behavior and demands that he hand over her belongings. Right then, a group of men in suits appears, shouting the mysterious girl's name. Desperate, she grabs the big guy's hand and begs for help to escape from there. The protagonist cuts short the escape, warning her that that path is a dead end. Without wasting time, Yusung pulls the startled girl in the opposite direction of the street. The two young people run quickly until they duck into a small ramen restaurant. The pair hides near the window while the guys in suits sprint past on the street. The young blue-haired girl peeks over the counter to make sure they are safe. Yusung sighs with total relief upon realizing that the major danger has finally passed. The girl thanks him for the help, but the young man demands to know why she was being chased. The two sit down at a table, and the girl introduces herself as Sasha, asking for the young man's name. She notices that Yusung doesn't look Japanese, and he explains he has Korean heritage. The big guy exudes a dark aura and orders her not to dodge the main topic. Since the girl hesitates to answer, the protagonist stands up and decides to leave the place. Sasha argues that common sense says to help pretty girls, but he ignores the excuse. In total desperation, the blue-haired young woman offers him a cash payment. The mysterious girl reveals an absurdly large amount of stacks of cold, hard cash. Hypnotized by the money, the big guy shakes her hand and accepts the deal right then and there. Realizing she can no longer hide the truth, Sasha decides to take off her hat. The movement reveals the girl's long, stunning blue hair falling over her shoulders. The young woman reveals that her dad is a very important man in the distant country of Luxia. She confesses with a sad look that those guys in suits were trying to abduct her. The big guy recognizes Sasha as the heroine of a famous manga and goes into shock. Later, the two step out of a clothing store after buying a small disguise. Sasha proudly shows off her new sporty look featuring a jacket and a stylish cap. Yusung agrees it's better for running, and she demands protection until 7 in the evening. The blue-haired girl suggests they look for some fun place to hang out. The protagonist is left incredulous that the young woman wants to hang out despite being a dangerous target. Sasha explains that crowds help lose pursuers, and Yusung finds the logic sound. The big guy remembers that the Russian girl is a highly popular main heroine from the series. He recalls that her first appearance was supposed to be bumping into the blonde protagonist. Yu-sung fries his brain trying to figure out if this event happened before the main manga storyline. The young man gets apprehensive about interfering so much with a main heroine's major story. The big guy looks back on his urge to turn down the money, claiming he wasn't for sale, but he admits the amount of cash was simply too large for his common sense to turn down. Sighing from exhaustion, the student accepts that he'll have to endure the job for 6 hours. Meanwhile, Sasha smiles slyly, boasting about being very good at reading people. The girl recalls the moment the big guy held her, revealing an absurd amount of strength. The young woman is absolutely certain that her muscular classmate can handle the job easily. The two start walking together again, but are cut off by a voice ordering them to freeze. The enemy henchmen spot the young couple from afar, and the big guy is startled by their speed. The protagonist pulls Sasha by the hand while fleeing and notices that the men are ex-KGB agents. However, their escape is suddenly cut short when a gigantic man blocks their path. One of the henchmen seizes the chance and charges forward, trying to land a punch on the big guy. Yu-sung blocks the enemy attack with just one hand, showing the slighted bit of difficulty. The Russian girl widens her eyes, impressed by her new bodyguard's absurd reflexes. Realizing the imminent danger, the big guy pushes his partner, telling her to hide immediately. He locks the young Russian girl inside a phone booth to keep her safe during the fight. The student analyzes his opponents and notes that they are on a totally different level. The ex-agents surround the big guy from all sides, ready for a coordinated attack on the street. Two men charge with everything, but the protagonist doesn't let himself be intimidated by the massive numerical disadvantage. The monster retaliates brutally, stating that in romantic comedies, the strongest guy always wins. Within a few seconds, the big guy easily knocks several highly trained agents to the ground. Yu-sung takes a combat stance, but an imposing voice commands all the henchmen to back down. The feared Captain Boris appears out of nowhere and attacks Yu-sung with an incredibly devastating blow. The big guy grits his teeth, feeling the heavy impact of the new opponent's surprise attack. The newcomer straightens up confidently, while his subordinates call him Captain Boris. The big leader mocks the student for jumping into things out of nowhere, but praises the boy's great endurance. The protagonist breaks into a cold sweat and observes his giant adversary with an extremely cautious expression. He wonders to himself if that dangerous veteran will also fall victim to his comedy power. Locked in the booth, the Russian girl cries in terror, thinking her savior doesn't stand a chance. Sasha is completely certain that it's impossible for someone like him to defeat the terrible Captain Boris. Yu-sung smiles confidently, finally understanding why the wealthy girl offered so much money. The protagonist exudes a powerful, intense aura, swearing to settle that major problem. He announces he'll end the fight quickly and charges at the leader at an absurd speed. The experienced Russian captain widens his eyes in fright, unable to keep up with the boy. Yu-sung lands a colossal hit on his adversary, generating a massive crash in the middle of the street. Giving no chance for defense, the student grips the enemy captain's arm with incredible force. The big guy slams the Russian giant to the ground, locking him into a dangerous joint lock. Yu-sung smiles sardonically while applying the powerful, feared submission hold to the villain's arm. The captain tries to fight through the attack bravely, but the pain becomes increasingly unbearable. The villain widens his eyes in terror as he finally recognizes the feared, brutal technique. Using his leads, the boy completely traps the Russian's body in a chokehold. The enemy leader cursed the student for using attacks focused on breaking joints. Boris screams in complete agony as the crushing force snaps dangerously against his hip. In one brutal movement, Yu-sung launches the adversary's gigantic body into the air with immense ease. The terrible villain faceplants onto the concrete floor with an impact that completely shatters the asphalt. The big guy takes a deep breath and looks down ruthlessly at the dangerous villain knocked out at his feet. Coldly, the young man remembers that joint injuries are serious and laments missing his gym workout. Sasha steps out of the phone booth, trembling in shock upon seeing that the captain was actually defeated. The girl admires the muscular student's back, unable to believe someone could be so strong. Far from there, a mysterious man answers the phone and receives the news about Boris's defeat. The man refuses to believe it, thinking it's impossible for a better fighter to exist in all of Japan. The informant describes the hero as a dark-haired, mixed-race young man standing nearly 7 feet tall. Upon hearing the description, the man gulps and asks if it refers to the feared Black Yaksha. Elsewhere, an internet forum explodes with rumors that the legendary Black Yaksha has returned. Users confirm the chaos happened in Akihabara and spread the gossip all across the city. A woman observes the comments and mocks those who doubt the mercenary's true power. The blue-eyed young woman smiles sinisterly, stating that the rookies know absolutely nothing. She recalls the legend of an unbeatable monster and the first God of Fists tournament from the past. The young woman recalls the legend of a mysterious fighter named Fumakotaro, who appeared out of nowhere in the past. The masked man fought only once and reached the tournament finals, becoming an absolute legend. The dark-haired woman wonders if the feared Fumakotaro has truly shown up again. Determined to investigate the rumors, the girl puts on her jacket and prepares to head out. She walks through the city streets with her long dark hair tied up in a ponytail. A familiar voice tells the young woman to wait, and she turns around startled upon recognizing her own dad. Far from there, Sasha and Yusung step into a lively made cafe and are warmly welcomed by the girls. The big guy dies of embarrassment from the cute welcome, while the Russian girl thinks everything is amazing. The young man hides his frustrated face, but his partner insists that visiting a cafe is a must in Japan. An adorable waitress guides the two customers to a small pink table in the middle of the floor. Sasha laughs and calls him the king of landmines for taking out the henchman earlier. The big guy feels shivers of dread upon opening the extremely bright and decorated menu. The Russian girl thinks it's dangerous to go out for weeks and deduces that the blame for all this lies with a wrist weapon. The young man gets very confused, and Sasha explains that the squads always use electromagnetic pulses. She reveals that her family's company is a gigantic weapons manufacturer in the country of Luxia. The young woman reminds her partner that she is the daughter of a very powerful and influential man. A waitress with cat ears interrupts the conversation, bringing over the food and startling the young man. Sasha gives thanks for the beautiful meal served while Yusung tries to process all that otaku culture. The waitress stops the two from eating, letting them know they need to perform a special ritual first. The employee tells them to repeat the movements, and the big guy feels like something terrible is about to happen. The cute girl puts her hands together, making a heart shape to start the grand magic. The waitress casts a love spell on the food, while the protagonist dies of embarrassment over the scene. The young man tries to decline the joke, but Sasha pushes him, letting him know it's a rule of the establishment. The big guy grits his teeth, completely red as he battles against his own wounded pride. Trembling with humiliation, he performs the cute spell, and his Russian partner bursts out laughing at his face. The waitress wishes them a good meal, while Yusung hides his face, crushed by that silly game. Despite all the awkwardness, the young man savors the food and admits that the dish is actually really good. The adorable employee smiles happily and asks if the flavor of the food was to their liking. She warns them that the last one to finish will face a penalty and holds up a pair of cat ears. The protagonist widens his eyes, breaking into a cold sweat upon realizing what the loser's terrible punishment will be. The girl explains that the loser will wear the ears and mio at the end of every sentence until the next game. Yusung begs for another option, but his partner trusts that they just need to win the match. The big guy's gaze turns deathly sharp with his absolute refusal to lose that game. Exuding a terrifying competitive aura, the young man holds his cards, swearing to come out victorious. In the end, the big guy loses the game and is forced to wear the cat ears, dying of utter humiliation. Furious over the loss, he demands an immediate rematch while his partner laughs hysterically. Sasha mocks him, saying the accessory doesn't suit him, and the young man swears he'll win the next round. After plenty of gaming, the two friends finally leave the cafe at the end of that busy afternoon. The Russian girl stretches, stating that the day was a lot of fun, while Yusung cries over losing everything. She doesn't mind missing out on the sightseeing tour, guaranteeing she had a blast with her partner. Walking under the orange sky, Sasha suddenly stops and notes she needs to confess a big secret. The girl admits that the men faced earlier were actually her own dad's security guards. She apologizes apologizes for the lie and shares that she just snuck out of the hotel to check out Japan. Sasha relieves her classmate from duty and says she will call the guards to return safely. With a radiant smile, she thanks the big guy for the wonderful day they spent together. Suddenly, a deep laugh echoes, and a bearded man celebrates finally tracking down the girl. The protagonist is startled to see a massive helicopter hovering right over their heads. The military aircraft creates a huge gust of wind in the middle of the street, completely surprising the two youths. The man in sunglasses mocks the girl's escape and thanks the young man for making the search easy. Yusong glares at the stranger with intense seriousness, while the villain questions the student's identity. The blue-haired girl gets startled and questions how they found her so quickly. The bearded man in sunglasses says that all of this is just a very personal matter. The newcomer walks calmly toward the young couple on the city street. Sasha apologizes for running away and tries to explain to her dad that she was already on her way back. The big guy widens his eyes in shock upon finally discovering who the bearded villain is. The protagonist thinks it's bizarre for a foreigner to speak Japanese so well right in the middle of the street. Confused by the conversation, the young Russian girl asks why he is talking about the black yaksha. The man points at the student and questions his daughter's involvement with the bodyguard. The old guy in the suit recalls that the mysterious fighter vanished without a trace 10 years ago. He accuses the big guy of being the legendary Fuma Kotaro and challenges him to a brutal match. The girl's dad shouts excitedly, swearing to finish the fight they started 18 years ago. Yusung interrupts the madness, revealing his true name and asking who he even is. The bearded man questions if the young man knows Fuma Kotaro, and the boy quickly denies it. A massive, awkward silence takes over the area after the young man's incredibly sincere denial. The old mobster covers up his embarrassment and promises to postpone the student's punishment for now. The big guy smiles in relief, thinking he just looks like that famous fighter from the past. However, the mood shifts when the man asks how the youth managed to defeat Captain Boris. The student breaks into a cold sweat, realizing he is referring to the Russian giant, and asks for forgiveness. The man lowers his glasses, revealing a threatening glare and ignoring the apology. Sasha's dad exudes a monstrous blue aura and prepares to attack the big guy. The old man clenches his fists and concentrates all his immense power into a single devastating blow. The young Russian girl screams Yusung's name in desperation, fearing for her friend's life. The protagonist reacts startled upon sensing the veteran's true malicious intent. Smiling macabrely, the crime boss demands that the boy show his strength. Yusung tries to dodge and ends up letting his backpack with his new manga drop to the floor. The young man cries tears of fury, swearing not to forgive anyone who mistreats his precious manga. The villain advances at an impressive speed, ready to crush the poor student. The big guy blocks the brutal punch, generating a shockwave that lights up the entire area. The bearded man praises the young man's endurance, while smoke rises around them. Without letting up, the villain grabs the protagonist's jacket and startles him with such raw speed. Yusung tries to understand the reason for the aggression, and the man claims that he is a genius. The old man thinks it's impossible for a high schooler with no training to defeat his right hand man. The two exchange more violent blows, creating explosions of energy right in the middle of the street. The man continues attacking and praises the boy, calling him the prodigy of the century. The big guy grits his teeth, feeling the crushing pressure of the enemy attacks. With his eyes glowing, the dangerous crime boss powers up even more. The veteran flashes a macabre smile and invites the student to come work for him. The villain lands another brutal hit, promising to help awaken the boy's talent. After hearing so many clutchy lines, the big guy finally comprehends what is going on. Yusung comes to the conclusion that this world has stopped being a romantic comedy. He notices that the villain's invitations sound exactly like lines from action and battle manga. The boy recalls that everything started with romance, clutches, and shy girls. But he understands that he trained his body until hitting a superhuman limit just to survive. He puts the pieces together and realizes his constant fights weren't mere accidents. The young man used to think his strength was just a comedic gag about his physique. The big guy deduces with horror that the series has changed genres and turned into a battle manga. He is certain of this crazy theory, remembering that the series' publisher absolutely loves fights. He recalls that keeping a pure romance in this magazine would end up tanking sales. The pressure for success forced the creator to focus the narrative on combat and constant action. The boy widens his eyes, paralyzed with dread as he notes the terrible shift in the series. Yu-sung panics, predicting he will be surrounded by monsters all the time and putting his life on the line. The blue-haired villain charges ahead with everything, offering a full sponsorship in his major criminal enterprise. The crime boss promises to cover all school expenses and give the boy absolutely anything he wants. The big guy tries to keep his cool, remembering that in battle manga, the villains always lose in the end. He visualizes the blonde protagonist defeating the old bearded man in the future to save the day. The student concludes that becoming the hero's best friend is the absolute guarantee of survival. Taking a deep breath, the young man sighs in relief at finally making his decision. Completely outraged, Yu-sung shouts, questioning why the old man has to be so extreme. The villain ignores the question and hits the big guy with a brutal and totally sudden punch. The protagonist spits blood, feeling firsthand that the enemy is genuinely trying to kill him. Sash's dangerous dad attacks fiercely, warning that he won't go easy on the student anymore. Yu-sung observes the enemy's movement and spots a massive opening in his defense. But the bearded man glares at him with a deathly stare, waiting for exactly that. The protagonist realizes he fell into a terrible trap and breaks into a cold sweat out of pure dread. The villain readies a powerful attack, emanating a terrifying purple aura from his own hand. The crime boss firmly grips the young man's arm and notes he will give him a piece of advice. Squeezing the student's wrist with crushing force, the old man explains the rule of punches. The man with glowing eyes teaches that a true attack needs to carry malicious intent. Without any mercy, the villain lands a colossal blow right in the middle of the young man's face. The big guy is thrown back violently, shattering the concrete floor with a massive impact. Yu-sung drops to his knees on the floor out of breath, trying to endure the agonizing pain of the attack. The youth wipes his mouth, stating he only survived because he managed to deflect the blow slightly. The boy fries his brain trying to figure out what kind of absurd and brutal technique that even was. The bearded man smiles arrogantly and reveals that he used the famous double eagle of the emperor. Yu-sung widens his eyes, completely shocked and confused by the attack's bizarre name. The villain proudly explains that it is his family's legendary and secret imperial martial art. The man charges forward at a blistering speed, and the big guy can barely block the combo. The student backs away, terrified upon realizing his eyes can't keep up with his rival's movements. Desperate over the one-sided beating, young Sasha screams, demanding her dad stop the fight. The furious old man tells his daughter not to meddle and swears to take the boy with him no matter what. The protagonist takes his combat stance, refusing the idea of surrendering that easily. The monster advises the boy to submit to him so he doesn't die, promising to teach him everything. The leader praises the young man's strength and guarantees that the whole world bows before true power. The big guy cracks a smile, mocking the old man for acting like a crazy, edgy teenager. The protagonist rejects the evil power, remembering that he already has a reason to fight. He looks back with great fondness on his precious and beloved school friends. With his eyes glowing with determination, the boy charges forward, shouting that he will never join evil. The bearded man praises the student's fine conviction, preparing for the final clash. The two collide fists, creating a gigantic explosion of energy across the scene. The young Russian girl screams in terror, while her dad promises to crush all that conviction. The crime boss lands a devastating cross on the student, shaking the entire environment. Yu-sung fails to dodge and takes the punch dead-on, completely losing his balance. The big guy's body is dragged backward by the absurd weight of the enemy's impact. The young man blinks out of breath, trying to stay on his feet despite the immense exhaustion, but the old assassin charges relentlessly, giving the boy not a single second to breathe. The villain lands a strike so fast that the student can barely see the approach. Radiating power, Sasha's dad readies his glowing fist for yet another merciless attack. Yu-sung widens his eyes and tries to defend quickly against his rival's next move. However, the man completely breaks the boy's defense with a violent, crushing impact. The protagonist groans in pain, concluding that that monster is on a completely superior level. The bearded villain approaches the fallen big guy and boasts about being the strongest man in the entire world. The blue-haired young woman screams desperately, demanding her dad put an end to all that carnage. Sasha steps in the middle to shield the young man, but the mobster orders his daughter to move out of the way immediately. The girl refuses to back down and threatens to intervene while the crime boss glares at her with intense fury. Suddenly, someone lands a quick, highly precise strike to the back of the young Russian girl's neck, knocking her out cold. The Russian girl gasps and falls unconscious onto the asphalt, leaving the student completely shocked. Protagonist glares at the old man, outraged that he has zero mercy even for his own daughter. The big guy tries to stay on his feet while a mysterious girl catches the fallen Russian girl's body. The bearded man ignores the boy's words and coldly decrees that the fight ends right now. Emanating a terrifying aura, the villain charges ahead with everything, readying a totally devastating punch. The monster's fist descends with crushing force, while the breathless big guy is unable to dodge. However, a sharp blade suddenly flies past, lightly nicking the old assassin's face. Several daggers drive violently into the concrete floor right in front of the feared crime boss. The Russian mobster backs off immediately, highly startled by the surprise attack that cut short his blow. Staring at the weapons on the ground, the bearded man goes on alert, recognizing the black yaksha's blades. Right at that moment, an extremely thin steel wire whizzes past, nearly catching the mobster's face. The dark-haired girl charges with fury, using a secret weapon against the enemy leader. The skilled young woman lands gracefully on the ground, taking the front line to protect her friends. The big guy stares at his heroine's back and is surprised as he tries to recognize his savior. The young man finally realizes that the protective young woman is the formidable captain of the school's kendo club. Completely confused, the student blinks, asking what the upperclassman is even doing there. The ninja glares at the bearded villain and states that the legendary fighter he is looking for is named Fuma Kotaro. She reveals that the warrior is her dad, but vanished from their secret village exactly 10 long years ago. The old assassin smiles, agreeing with the story and mentioning he had already heard those rumors. The Russian mobster excitedly concludes that the feared legend truly had a beautiful ninja daughter hidden away. Without breaking her focus, the upperclassman hands a mysterious glowing pill to the injured big guy. She quickly explains that her family's secret medicine will awaken his true, full power. The mobster notices the setup and charges furiously, guaranteeing he will never just stand around watching that. The captain tells the young man to swallow the pill quickly, while she tries to hold back the old Russian's fury. Desperate, the protagonist throws the glowing pill into his mouth, hoping the cure works. The big guy swallows the medicine and widens his eyes, feeling an immediate surge of energy through his body. The mysterious pill creates a literal, intense explosion of scalding flames in his stomach. The boy grips his own chest, crying out in agony while the upperclassman watches the scene worriedly. Glowing veins filled with fire spread across the young man's neck, showing off the absurd power. The protagonist lets out a massive, terrifying roar as a colossal aura of flames explodes outward. The Russian mobster and the ninja captain go into absolute shock at the sheer scale of the released power. Shrouded in a gigantic pillar of fire, the student observes his own muscles pulsing nonstop. The student clenches his fist tightly, feeling a crushing strength in his hands. With an extremely sharp gaze, he marvels at the conclusion that his physical limit has been shattered. The big guy feels as if a third eye has just awakened deep within his mind. The student can finally see the enemy's deadly aura clashing against his own power. Shocked by the phenomenon, the ninja admits that the vital energy released surpassed all her expectations. However, the young woman coolly evaluates the situation, remembering that the pill's effect lasts only 5 minutes. The bearded man cracks a dark smile, calling that intense energy the mystical power of the East. The Russian leader praises the miraculous use of Asian medicine while analyzing the big guy's stance. Yusung glares at his rival with hatred, calling the old mobster a hopeless villain for hurting his daughter. The bearded assassin ignores the student's heavy insults and merely smiles in a macabre way. The powerful mob boss breaks into a massive, terrifying laugh, echoing through the empty street. The bearded man points his finger in the boy's face, warning him that moral speeches are mere excuses. The villain swears that brute force rules the world, while the formidable ninja readies her deadly blades. Emanating a furious aura, the big guy takes a combat stance and challenges the old man to knock him down. The villain smiles and manifests a lightning tiger, guaranteeing he will do just that, if the boy can actually take it. Without wasting time, the assassin charges, unleashing a brutal and fast punch against the boy. The two collide, and the big guy grits his teeth, feeling that his opponent's strength is still absurd. The mob boss displays a smile of pure confidence and cruelty during the violent exchange of blows. The protagonist is surprised to realize that the enemy's movements are perfectly visible now. The clash intensifies with the fighters, trading punches at impressive speed and power. The mobster goes into shock upon noticing that the young student is actually reading his attacks. Seizing a small opening in the enemy's guard, the big guy decides to make his move and counterattack. Yusung lands a spectacular uppercut right on the villain's chin, launching the man into the air. Next, the boy delivers a devastating straight punch to the old man's face with all his flaming strength. The weight of the monstrous blow forces the crime boss's body to skid brutally across the asphalt. Sash's dad widens his eyes in disbelief over being overpowered by some punk's attack. The protagonist seizes the advantage and continues obliterating his adversary with relentless punches. The assassin breaks into a cold sweat, noticing that the boy's precision and speed have increased shockingly. The villain deduces it's all thanks to the mysterious pill, but refuses to accept that humiliation. The man manifests an energy griffon, swearing that the strongest in the world would never lose to a high schooler. With a furious shout filled with hatred, the Russian prepares his powerful, little energy claws. The bearded monster orders the young man to perish as he attacks with absolutely relentless fury. The boy keeps his eyes locked on the threat and readies himself for the dangerous, impending impact. With perfect reflexes, Yusung blocks the attack, catching his adversary's murderous fist. The villain lets out a maniacal laugh, mocking the futile effort to try and stop that supreme strike. The enemy leader promises to tear the boy's arms off using his feared griffon's claws. The big guy struggles under the pressure of the enemy blow but doesn't back down, guaranteeing he will hold out. The student tells the mobster to hold on tight as his flames increase drastically. In a perfect movement, the protagonist twists his rival's arm, breaking his defensive stance. Yusung applies a relentless sweep, destroying any chance of balance for the powerful Russian. The villain widens his eyes, completely horrified as his giant body topples backward. Before the enemy can hit the ground, the young man readies a final blow, concentrating all his power. The leader is smashed against the concrete and groans in pain, refusing to believe that real defeat. Ivan Romanov reflects on his grand title as the strongest man on the entire planet. The old man feels absolutely humiliated over being bested by a simple high school boy. Fallen and defeated, the big mob boss closes his eyes, unable to accept his bitter fate. The big guy takes a deep breath and observes the terrible villain, finally subdued at his feet. The protagonist displays a serene look and apologizes for crushing the old fighter's pride. The boy flashes an ironic smile, revealing that he is actually a proud Korean citizen. Fuma and Sasha are left with their jaws dropped, totally marveled by the fight's massive turn of events. The young woman can't believe the student actually defeated the legend of the underworld. The unbeatable champion and god of fists lies knocked out shamefully right in the middle of the street. The ninja captain is impressed by masterfully her classmate exploited an opening. The big guy blinks out of breath, trying to catch his wind after burning through so much energy. The young Russian girl runs desperately toward her savior, wanting to know if he is badly hurt. The young man apologizes for the beating, but the girl reassures him, saying the old man had it coming. The ninja notes she will clean up the mess in the area and tells the student to head home and rest. Sasha warns that her dad will wake up soon and asks them to flee before a crowd gathers. Suddenly, Yusung's legs give out and his massive body collapses out of pure exhaustion. The ninja catches the big guy, noticing that the pill's effect drained every bit of his stamina. The young hero closes his eyes and passes out with a small smile of a job well done on his face. Beautiful Sasha watches her protector being carried away, blushing as she feels immense gratitude. Fuma carries the unconscious hero to safety, while the curious crowd surrounds the fallen villain. The highly anticipated Golden Week holiday finally comes to an end at school. Yusung walks through the hallways, massaging his own sore neck. The big guy sighs tiredly, figuring that it's just regular battle fatigue. He steps into the classroom, greeting his classmates and finding the complete silence on the internet strange. The young man gets tense over the lack of news, but the teacher tells everyone to settle down. The woman smiles excitedly, announcing the arrival of a new transfer student from Russia. The classroom door suddenly opens, and a school shoe steps into the room. A beautiful girl with long blue hair tosses her head as she walks into the classroom. Yusung widens his eyes in complete shock upon recognizing the young foreigner. The girl smiles radiantly, introducing herself as Sasha and charming the entire class. The big guy breaks into a cold sweat in complete desperation, while the students praise the newcomer. The young Russian girl lists her luxurious hobbies and decides to reveal what she likes most now. Without hesitating, she points her index finger firmly in the direction of the desks. The foreign student points directly at the face of the terrified Yusung. The protagonist goes into absolute shock, looking like he just got struck by a massive bolt of lightning. The blonde hero smiles, thinking that public confession is totally worthy of a romantic comedy. Yusung realizes in despair that his peaceful life has just been completely destroyed. The young Russian girl points her finger in an excited, confident way right in the middle of the classroom. The other students murmur, impressed by her ability to speak Japanese so well. Surrounded by her classmates, the newcomer explains that she learned the language by watching anime. The big guy freezes upon hearing the girl confirm her sudden feelings. Sasha reveals, blushing, that her ideal type is someone much stronger than her own dad. The class gossips about the rumors of the big guy being involved with the other girls. Yusung tries to hide his embarrassment while Rika observes the Russian girl suspiciously. The blonde hides her jealousy and grumbles, annoyed by the new student's approach. Rika crosses her arms and accuses her classmate of scoring a foreign girlfriend over the holiday. The young man breaks into a cold sweat, unable to refute such a cliché romance manga scenario. He analyzes the Russian girl, figuring her feelings were supposed to be for Sakamoto. The big guy cries internally, fearing he has ruined the original story forever. Suddenly, the troublemaker redhead appears smiling and calls out both classmates' names. Tojo Karen pops into the classroom with a big smile, letting them know she came to hang out. The redhead hugs Yusung from behind, surprising the young man while Rika glares daggers at her rival. The foreign girl with blue hair stares at the mobster girl with an extremely sharp gaze. Sasha points her finger and orders the redhead to step away from the big guy immediately. Karen loses her patience and asks who the newcomer thinks she is to be giving her orders. The blue-haired girl adjusts her clothes, with plenty of confidence in front of her major rival. The Russian girl holds the young man's arm and proclaims herself his brand new future girlfriend. The redhead yells, completely blushing and outraged by the foreigner's absolute audacity. Without thinking, Karen argues that the big guy is already her blonde partner's boyfriend. The entire class watches in shock as the three girls fight over the silent young man. Yusung breaks into a cold sweat, trying to figure out how he became Rika's boyfriend without even noticing. The blonde screams in terror, guaranteeing the mobster girl that they are just good friends. The redhead notices her own misunderstanding while Sasha smiles, tasting the sweetness of victory. The Russian girl hugs the big guy's arm, celebrating the chance to steal him away for herself. The chaotic mood is cut short when the class representative with glasses approaches. The girl with braided hair calmly asks for permission to request a favor. The representative reveals she lost her focus during class and asks to borrow his notes. The big guy readily agrees and hands over his notebook to his classmate with glasses. The girl thanks him with a bow and promises to return the material real quick. Rika gets confused as to why the studious student would need help, and Yu-sung defends his classmate. The redhead thinks it's weird for the class rep to ask a powerhouse for notes, but the young man states he is great at his studies. The girls ask for his rank, and the big guy realizes that all of them genuinely thought he was dung. The protagonist reveals he is the #1 ranked student in the entire school, leaving the 3 girls completely in shock. A classmate defends the girls, saying the young man's look doesn't help much, and Yu-sung tells his friend to shut his mouth right then and there. The friend confesses that he would also doubt it if he didn't know he entered the school as the freshman with the highest score. The classmate comments that Rika isn't the least bit afraid of the big guy because she already knows he's a truly gentle guy underneath. The blonde newcomer proudly agrees, stating that her partner is super caring once you get to know him better. Totally embarrassed by the praise, the protagonist stands up quickly and makes up an excuse that he needs to use the restroom. The friend jokes about the giant's sudden shyness while the young man walks away trying to make sense of the group's weird behavior. Down the hallways, the big guy decides to keep a safe distance from the foreigner and try to stay far away from that entire group. The bell finally rings, and lunchtime begins in the school's packed cafeteria. But the young man's plan fails miserably, and he ends up surrounded by the 3 girls at the exact same table. The protagonist cries internally, frustrated over failing to keep the safe distance he had planned. The girls followed the young man everywhere and are now fiercely fighting for a simple spot next to him in the cafeteria. The other students are dying of envy over the big guy's luck, while he suffers, fearing more misunderstandings around the school. He doesn't get the trio's good mood and fries his brain trying to cook up an escape plan to break out of that tense situation. Suddenly, the giant's face lights up as he hits on an absolutely genius idea to get the young woman off his back. The big guy slams the table, startling the girls as he asks if they are prepared for the difficult final exams. The lively mood dies right then and there, and the blonde complains to her friend for bringing up such a sad topic during their meal. The protagonist celebrates the super effective hit and readies himself for the next big blow to the girl's pride. The blonde newcomer breaks into a cold sweat, regretting not studying the material ahead of time. The redhead cries, complaining about the difficulty of history, while the Russian girl laments the complexity of classical literature. With a wicked smile, the student realizes that this is the golden opportunity to get rid of his friends once and for all. The young man suggests that the 3 of them form a study group among themselves, and the redhead thinks her classmate's idea is wonderful. The mobster girl offers her massive mansion to host the event, and the foreigner agrees to cooperate for the sake of her grades. The big guy cracks a macabre smile, celebrating his guaranteed freedom since he has big plans for the weekend. The weekend of his dreams finally arrives, bringing peace and quiet to the young student's home. The big guy wipes the sweat from his forehead with a proud smile, highly satisfied with his own effort. He celebrates completing his biggest goal, which was setting up a private gym right inside his own bedroom. The young man used the entire massive fortune he won from the young Russian girl to buy the best workout equipment possible. Thrilled with his new toys, the giant grips the weight bar firmly to begin his heavy training session. He lifts the bar, laughing like a maniac and feeling immense joy over training in peace in his own sanctuary. But his joy lasts a very short time when his phone starts ringing loudly, breaking the silence of his bedroom. He answers the call confused and hears his blonde partner excitedly telling him to look out the window real quick. The big guy walks over to the window holding the device, pointing out that the study group was supposed to be at the young mobster's house. The young man looks through the glass totally shocked, trying to figure out when exactly he agreed to join that study group. The blonde newcomer smiles, waving from the street and demanding he come down fast to join them on their outing. However, the giant's expression twists into pure dread upon noticing a very important detail in the scene outside. The student recognizes the dangerous Russian military guards, standing with unfriendly faces, right behind his partner. Completely paralyzed with fear, the big guy tries to process what kind of chaotic event this even is. Failing to grasp the danger, the blonde gently points to the black van and invites her classmate to hop in the vehicle. The big guy steps into the vehicle and feels his spine freeze upon coming face to face with the massive Russian powerhouse sitting in the driver's seat. The protagonist perfectly remembers beating that giant, merciless man to a pulp just days ago in the middle of the street. With an innocent smile, his partner introduces the dangerous military captain as their foreign friend's kind uncle. The young Russian girl guarantees that the driver doesn't understand their language and claims the man is quite gentle despite his looks. Whispering, the young man questions the captain's presence, and the Russian girl explains she needs an escort during her days off. The student closes his eyes tightly, finding it bizarre to travel in the same car as the man he nearly sent to the afterlife. The group finally arrives safely and walks peacefully toward the luxury traditional mansion of the mobster family. The group of students is warmly welcomed by the young redhead and a massive, smiling man wearing dark clothes. Yu-sung goes into shock, recognizing the terrible assassin leader, and decides to play dumb so he doesn't cause even more trouble. The young man bows politely, thanking the host while trying to act as normal as possible. The redhead's powerful dad glares at the young student up close, leaving the boy sweating in a cold sweat out of nervousness. The monster praises the young man, calling him the ideal future successor and the future husband of his beloved daughter. The man quickly changes the subject upon recognizing the large Russian bodyguard all bandaged up in the room. The host laughs in surprise upon realizing that the daughter of the terrible Ivan Noah studies in the same classroom as Karen. The whole group gets confused upon noticing that the two dangerous underworld leaders already know each other from way back. The redhead's dad asks curiously what caused so many serious injuries to the experienced veteran's head. Without thinking twice, the Russian captain points his index finger straight at the true culprit. The Russian powerhouse accuses the student, and the big guy goes into a complete panic, wanting to hide. Rika widens her eyes in shock upon discovering that her great friend caused all that damage to the man. The mood gets worse when Boris reveals that even the feared Tsar was seriously injured by the young student. Protagonist breaks into a cold sweat, believing his end has finally come and that he will be kicked out of that mansion. But the boy soon smiles, figuring that getting kicked out would give him free time to enjoy his new gym. The redhead's powerful dad widens his eyes, completely blown away by the young man's absurd strength. The mobster breaks into a massive laugh, praising the boy as the perfect material to be his son-in-law. The young redhead screams desperately, demanding her dad stop, saying so many embarrassing things. Later, now inside a traditional and quiet Japanese room, the big guy sighs with massive relief. He feels his head spinning from so much confusion, while the girls bicker among themselves right behind him. The group finally sits around the low table, and the boy notes that they need to focus on their studies. The young man proposes checking each one's weak points, and Rika confesses to having a lot of trouble with STEM. The student hands over a packet, stating that the best move is to memorize the main formulas for the exam. The young woman cries in despair upon seeing the immense amount of papers they will need to memorize soon. Next, the makeshift teacher calls the redhead's name, and the girl answers, all excited. The young man evaluates his friend's average grades and warns that her lack of memorization is a big problem for her. He suggests a different method to help her retain the information, and the young woman agrees very enthusiastically. The blue-haired foreigner smiles radiantly, asking what her big challenge will be. the big guy pulls out his own notebook, stating that it will be quite tough for her to grasp the concepts right away. The young man hands over his personal material, offering help for them to study all those pages together. With all the materials handed out, the major intensive study session finally begins at the mansion. After an hour, the young redhead already shows herself to be completely bored and tired of reading so many pages. 2 hours later, Karen is asleep at the table while Rika dozes off and Sasha discreetly plays on her phone. Noticing the general fatigue, the big guy announces it's time for a break, and the girls shout with joy. The young man asks to borrow the kitchen, and the red-headed mobster girl gets confused, questioning the reason for the request. Smiling gently, he lets them know he will whip up a nice snack to refresh the whole group's energy. Minutes later, the big guy returns carrying a large tray, surprising the young students. The young man places beautiful bowls of shaved ice packed with delicious sweet toppings onto the table. The girls are marveled by the stunning look of the famous traditional Korean desserts. The pair grabs their phones to snap lots of photos of the beautiful, colorful dishes before digging in. The blue-haired foreigner smiles slyly and catches her muscular partner's attention. Sasha extends her spoon full of sweetness, demanding they sample each other's dishes like good friends. The young man backs away, breaking into a cold sweat and trying to turn down the embarrassing offer from his persistent classmate. The Russian girl pouts, complaining that her arm is getting tired, and the boy gives in to the emotional blackmail. The big guy opens his mouth blushing while the redhead and the blonde glare at the scene, dying of pure jealousy. Sasha smiles, demanding that he feed her too, and the two friends completely lose control of their anger. Rika stands up furious, pushing her dish forward and demanding her friend do a trade with her too. The redhead yells annoyed, demanding the young man try her food first, since she is the grand host. Observing that terrible romantic dispute, Karen finally realizes she has been a massive idiot. She recalls the moment when the blonde newcomer desperately guaranteed that she was just friends with the big guy. The redhead remembers Sasha taking advantage of that exact misunderstanding to steal the young man's attention. Karen finally understands that her feelings for the big guy were born when he comforted her in the park. Yusung tries to reason things out, while the blonde points out that the major revelation changes everything. The young redhead holds her dish blushing, realizing she still has a real shot with him. Time passes, and the scene shifts to the door of the sophomore classroom at school. The young blonde shows off her exam sheet, radiant with joy as she celebrates the end of finals. She boasts about her high grades, and the big guy praises his partner's massive effort. The friend with glasses suggests that the whole group head to Karak to celebrate the end of exams. Rika offers to cover the whole bill, while the friend cries over doing poorly on his tests. Changing the subject, the classmate with glasses warns that more bad rumors have popped up about Yusung. The gossip says that the young man took down 20 Russian mobsters all by himself in the street. The friend laughs, thinking the story is way too absurd, and calls anyone who believes it a complete fool. The young Russian girl leans close to the big guy, whispering slyly to ask if the story is a lie. Sasha ignores the tension and strikes a pose, promising to charm everyone with her angelic voice. The Russian girl chooses to sing a melancholic song and tells everyone to hurry up so they can hang out. After class, the lively group of students finally arrives in the famous district of Shibuya. The girls walk happy and excited toward the Karak bar alongside their school friends. The guy with glasses halts their walk, noticing that it's already past lunchtime. The classmate smiles, suggesting they grab lunch at a burger joint nearby. Suddenly, a biker speeds past at high velocity, startling the entire group right in the middle of the street. The red-haired delinquent insults the students, telling them to watch where they're going. Yusung asks if his friend is okay, and Rika panics upon noticing her wallet was stolen. The protagonist tells his classmate to wait there and sprints quickly in the runner's direction. The big guy runs through the streets at an absolutely impressive and terrifying speed. The young blonde screams her partner's name, completely shocked by his sudden action. Yusung tells everyone to take cover in the shop, while promising to recover the stolen item. Far from there, the criminal criminals hide out in an alley, celebrating the theft of the valuable wallet. The red-haired thug flashes the cash, while his bald partner fears the boss might find out. The partner hears thundering footsteps and points terrified at what is approaching. The big guy appears, exuding pure fury, and orders the thugs to give back his friend's wallet. The criminals get startled by the monster, and the red-haired rider revs the bike to try and escape. The coward mocks the young man, shouting that a guy on foot could never catch up to a motorcycle. However, the delinquent goes into shock upon seeing the big guy running right alongside him. With his eyes glowing, the protagonist demands the wallet, and the rider screams terrified. Without a shred of mercy, Yu-sung drives his hands with crushing force into the back of the enemy motorcycle. The young man's absurd strength halts the bike completely, and the thug is thrown forward. The coward perceives the gap in power and apologizes desperately, begging for mercy. With a terrifying dark aura, the big guy orders the delinquent to step off the vehicle. Trembling with pure dread, the thug bows and returns the pink wallet to the monster. The thug flees crying on his bike, while the young man threatens him never to do that again. The protagonist holds the pink wallet, grumbling over all that unnecessary trouble. Back with the group, Rika holds her wallet, very happy and relieved to have recovered everything. Yu-sung notices the mischief in his classmate's smile, remembering he promised to pay for the outing. The young man walks along satisfied, completely unaware of a mysterious man watching him from far away. The intimidating figure hides his face in the shadows while keeping watch over the young student. The sun sets, and the lively group says their goodbyes after an entire day of tons of fun. The protagonist walks alone under the beautiful orange sky toward his own house. Yu-sung smiles excitedly, thinking about his heavy weight training session later this evening. He stops confused upon hearing someone calling out for a supposed boss in the middle of the empty street. The mysterious man with a peculiar hairstyle shouts that he has something very important to say. The student asks for the stranger's identity while the man approaches rapidly. The powerhouse drops to his knees, bowing his head before the completely shocked protagonist. The stranger begs on his knees to be accepted as the student's top disciple. A curious crowd gathers while the big guy asks for the crazy man's identity. Powerhouse introduces himself as Goto Kazuya, and the protagonist tells him to stand up. Kazuya pulls the boy close and demands to be called just Katsu with total familiarity. Away from the chaos, Yu-sung asks for the delinquent's true age. Katsu reveals he is only 17 years old, and the student judges his old man looks. The fellow explains that he is the top leader of the local biker gang. Yu-sung finally figures out that he is the boss of the thugs who stole the wallet. Katsu claims he tracked the boy down because he is the exact definition of a real man. The biker confesses that he always had a very shy personality back in his childhood. He reveals he endured terrible bullying from everyone for being a pretty weak guy. Katsu believed he needed to become strong to put an end to all that suffering. He sought strength to guarantee that no one would ever look at him with such contempt again. The delinquent started mimicking tough behaviors to match his massive physique. He became a gang leader, but felt like he was a coward pretending to be something else. Katsu laments ending up running with guys who look down on the weak. The leader notes that the big guy managed to outrun his boy's motorcycle just by sprinting. He admires the fact that Yu-sung didn't use his brute force just to show off. The veteran praises the young man for using his power only to save his friend from danger. Katsu gets emotional, declaring that the student is the ultimate example of a real man. The leader cries, begging once more to be trained by the powerful boy. Yu-sung sighs tiredly, wondering why he attracts so many weirdos into his life. But the protagonist smiles slyly as he hits on a genius idea to get rid of the nuisance. The big guy accepts the request, and the delinquent thrills with pure joy at the news. However, the student sets a very important condition to seal that deal. Raising his hand, the young man stipulates a trial period of exactly 3 days. Yu-sung challenges the crazy guy to spend 3 whole days keeping up with his heavy routine. If the biker can endure the challenge, he promises to accept him as an official disciple. Katsu accepts the grand proposal, his eyes burning with pure determination. Yu-sung laughs sardonically, planning to put the man through absolute torture until he quits the training. A public clock marks the early morning as the sound of heavy, labored breathing echoes through the quiet park. Yuzeong runs at a steady pace while Kazuya struggles to keep up, desperately calling out for his master. The protagonist had assumed the big guy would have great physical endurance due to his size, so he planned a rigorous workout. However, the biker's performance is abysmal, leaving the young master completely disappointed by such weakness. He quickly realizes that this is actually a good thing, as poor performance will make his plan to get the guy to quit much easier. Yuzeong decides to stop the run to start the next part of the test, while the delinquent nearly collapses from exhaustion. The young man points to the pull up bar and orders his supposed disciple to try doing a few repetitions. With great determination, the big guy grips the cold metal, ready to give everything he has in that moment. The delinquent lets out a fierce shout with eyes full of fire, startling Yuzeong with such sudden energy. But all that tough guy posturing vanishes quickly when he starts shaking uncontrollably, unable to pull himself up even an inch. Kazuya eventually loses his strength and falls backward onto the ground, while his master watches in complete silence. The protagonist is horrified to see the man failed the first attempt and realizes he is completely out of shape. Yuzeong announces that the test is over because the guy simply doesn't have the strength required to continue training. Desperate, the big guy grabs his master's shirt, begging for the 3-day grace period that had been agreed upon. He cries, admitting that he focused only on building muscle mass and completely forgot to train his stamina. The delinquent argues logically that if he were already strong, he wouldn't need to seek the teachings of a master. Seeing the humiliation, Yuzeong eventually yields and says they still have plenty of free time before classes start. Protagonist orders the rookie to join him in pull-up training for the next 2 hours without complaining. Yuzeong demonstrates the exercise perfectly, jumping up and holding firmly at the top. Under the amazed gaze of the big guy, the delinquent tries to repeat the movement, holding on with great difficulty while shaking under his master's commands. The training continues with many falls and much fatigue, but the rookie keeps getting back up to try the exercise again. Later, Yuzeong walks calmly toward the school, wearing his uniform and carrying his traditional backpack. The protagonist recalls with surprise that the delinquent actually managed to endure the 2 hours of intense training. The original plan was to make the big guy quit on the very first day with that heavy physical routine, but the biker's immense willpower ended up motivating the master himself to take the situation seriously. He worries about the consequences if the biker passes the test, until he is interrupted by a shout calling his name. Satoru approaches, running over very excitedly and asking his friend if he has heard the biggest gossip of the moment. His friend says someone incredible is about to return to class and mentions the school's 3 great beauties. Yuzeong says he has never heard of any of them, and his friend reacts with frustration at his lack of interest. Satoru explains that the first beauty is the elegant student council president, Saionji Kamiko. The second is the kendo club captain, Fumayukika, and the protagonist realizes he already knows both girls. Finally, his friend introduces the last beauty, an extremely famous rising actress named Minato Nao. The protagonist is confused to discover that a real celebrity goes to the same school as them. Satoru cries with excitement as he reveals she is finally returning to school after a long and busy work schedule. The guy with glasses is indignant at the lack of interest and reveals he is a proud VIP member of the actress's official fan club. The protagonist decides to leave because he is too busy thinking about his training to care about celebrities. His friend doesn't give up and follows him, trying to convince him to join the fan club as well. Later, at a gym, the protagonist is welcomed with open arms by the local trainer. The young man greets trainer Nakayama, who quickly notices the intimidating physique of the biker trailing behind him. Kazuya introduces himself politely, and the protagonist asks for permission for his new friend to train there for a 3-day trial. The trainer accepts the request immediately, excited to see a young man with such immense physical potential in his gym. The protagonist realizes the instructor has high expectations for a guy who is actually completely out of shape. A desperate shout echoes through the gym right after the first cardiovascular exercise on the treadmill begins. Kazuya screams for help, begging to slow down while his master runs alongside him without the slightest effort. The protagonist tells the rookie to press the emergency stop button on the machine before a disaster happens. With the strength he had left, the delinquent stretches out his arm and presses the stop button in a panic. He falls onto the treadmill, exhausted, leaving the experienced trainer Nikayama completely confused by his performance. The trainer explains that the guy is the classic case of someone who only gained bulk but has no cardiovascular endurance. Even the seasoned instructor admits it will be an extremely difficult task to train someone in that state. Kazuya kneels down, begging for one more chance, and promises he will try his hardest to improve his stamina. Kazuya stays on his knees, pleading with the trainer, while Yu Seong just watches the scene with great embarrassment. The instructor tells the guy to get up, and Yu Seong lets out a long sigh of pure relief now that the drama is over. With the workout finished for the day, the protagonist says goodbye to the trainer and mentions he is heading home. Outside, Yu Seong walks next to the delinquent, who is visibly destroyed and can barely stay on his feet. The biker is shaking all over but tries to brush it off, saying this fatigue is nothing compared to his dream of being a disciple. Seeing the guy's great effort, the protagonist realizes he can no longer put off a very important conversation with him. He decides to stop in the middle of the path to demand a solemn promise from the rookie before it's too late. Yu Seong tells him seriously that if the delinquent really wants to become his disciple and turn into a true man, he must make a drastic decision from that exact moment on and abandon his biker gang for good. The big guy's eyes widen, completely shocked and speechless upon hearing such an unexpected demand from his master. The protagonist makes it crystal clear that if he doesn't do it, the training will be cancelled and he will never be accepted there again. The young master repeats his definitive condition, demanding the immediate departure from the group of street delinquents. The biker's mind falls into a real internal conflict while he tries to process the weight of that difficult choice. The hero reinforces that this is his only condition for continuing to pass on his valuable teachings of strength. The delinquent wonders internally if he should really leave the leadership of his famous biker gang behind. He remembers with fondness the companions who took him in during difficult times and were like brothers in battle. Yu Seong explains that a true man only becomes strong when he finds something precious and decides to protect it with his life. The young man asks the big guy if there is any such valuable person in his life, like a dear family member, for example. The biker becomes very thoughtful and confesses, that the most important person in his life is his own mother. He reveals that his father abandoned them when he was very small and that his mother had to struggle hard to raise him alone. The young delinquent's face turns melancholy as he remembers all the suffering his mother went through over the years. He agrees with his master and decides in that instant to resign from his position as gang leader to follow a better path. Kazuya promises that he was tired of that empty life and vows that he will never commit crimes or cause trouble on the streets again. Satisfied with the honest answer, the protagonist seals the deal with a friendly pat on his new disciple's shoulders. The two share a firm handshake, decreeing the start of a new and tough journey of friendship and heavy training together. The protagonist says the weekend will bring intensive full-day training, and the rookie accepts very excitedly. The next day, the scene shifts again to the bright sign of the famous neighborhood gym. Yu Seong arrives wearing his workout gear and soon hears shouts of pure physical effort coming from inside the building. The delinquent is using a weight machine with all his might and dedication right at the start of that morning workout. The instructor welcomes the newcomer while the young man watches his motivated disciple's performance with surprise. The The trainer laughs and says the rookie arrived an hour early, and he shouts new posture instructions to the big guy. Nikayama praises the boy's incredible determination and notes that he functions like a machine during strength training. The protagonist wears a proud smile, agreeing that when it comes to willpower, his disciple is truly unbeatable. Later, birds fly high around the building, while groans of pure physical exhaustion echo along the street sidewalk. The rookie can barely take a step as his legs shake, and the master explains he worked out all his muscle groups today. Even while crying from the pain, the big guy thanks him for the lesson, while Yuzeong promises an even worse workout for the final test day. The protagonist suddenly remembers something and starts rummaging through his bag, pulling out a mysterious item from inside. The hero hands him a traditional packed lunch and suggests that the disciple take it to eat with his dear mother. He says he prepared a very generous portion, since the young man's mother also needed to eat well. The Chinese-style bento looks delicious and leaves the big guy completely moved by such kindness. Kazuya begins to cry loudly out of pure gratitude, leaving Yuseong desperate as he tries to quiet the big guy's spectacle on the street. He bows on the sidewalk, shouting his eternal respect while people around them start looking, thinking it's all very bizarre. With clenched fists, the young man promises himself that he will pass the final day of training and become the hero's official disciple. Later, he walks happily, whistling with joy along the neighborhood sidewalks toward his family home. The biker feels like the luckiest person in the world for having crossed paths with such a generous and incredible master. He smiles in relief, thinking about how good it was to make the firm decision to leave his delinquent gang today. But his joy is suddenly interrupted when he notices a familiar presence, badly hurt, standing right in front of him on the sidewalk. He comes face to face with his former gang members, completely covered in bandages and casts all over their injured bodies. The boys cry and beg desperately for help from their former leader, leaving the big guy completely paralyzed. The clock keeps ticking silently, indicating that a great storm is about to break over all of them. At the gym, the protagonist notices, with quite a bit of strangeness, that Kazuya is very late for the final day of testing. He wonders if the big guy gave up, but soon remembers the delinquent would never run away out of a lack of determination. Yuzeong deeply regrets not getting the guy's phone number to find out what had happened. Time keeps passing quickly, indicating the end of the time when the training was supposed to be happening. With no sign of his disciple, the protagonist decides to leave, saying goodbye to his attentive trainer at the gym exit. He reflects on the rookie's disappearance and tries to convince himself that it's better not to get involved in gang problems. The young master walks under the sunset sky, repeating to himself that he only wishes to live a quiet and normal life. But the image of the big guy crying with gratitude when receiving that lunch won't leave the young man's head at all. Suddenly, the protagonist's thoughts are interrupted when a tired voice calls out to him desperately from behind. He turns around and comes face to face with one of Kazuya's injured subordinates, who recognizes him as the former leader's master. The hurt boy reveals he came on Kazuya's behalf to personally explain the reason for his absence from today's training. Upon noticing the messenger's pitiful state, Yuzeong confirms his suspicions that something very serious happened to Kazuya. The boy tries to leave after delivering the message, but the hero firmly grabs his shoulder, ordering him to wait a bit longer. With an extremely serious and piercing look, the protagonist demands that the young man explain the whole situation in detail. The scene shifts to an old, dark abandoned warehouse that serves as a meeting point for the region's delinquents. Several motorcycles arrive at the location at high speed, making a deafening noise as engines cut through the silence of the night. The terrible leader of the rival gang, called Mao, appears wearing his helmet and mocks the arrival of the area's former commander. Kazuya appears wearing his battle clothes and holding a wooden staff with a look of pure bravery and courage. The former leader confronts his rival, Mao, demanding immediate explanations for why he cowardly beat up his former men. The villain Mao just laughs mockingly, pointing out that those people are nothing more than ex-subordinates without any real protection. action. Mao brags, saying that Kazuya's resignation made it easier for him to dominate the entire territory and subdue the other guys. The villain points behind him, showing that Kazuya's former partners were taken hostage and forced to surrender. The injured boys cry, begging for forgiveness for having yielded enemy blackmail just to survive. Consumed by fury at seeing his friends suffering, Kazuya charges at his rival, determined to put an end to that cowardice. The combat staves collide with immense violence, generating a powerful impact in the center of the abandoned warehouse. An old blonde ally named Mitu appears with a treacherous smile and positions himself to fight against the former leader, Kazuya. Kazuya shouts in rage at the traitor Mito, who sold his own group's loyalty in exchange for power in the enemy gang. Kazuya feels the extreme fatigue from Yu Ziyong's training weighing on his muscles, significantly reducing his battle performance. The brutal fight is abruptly interrupted by an imposing command that echoes loudly through the entrance of the old warehouse. The hero Yu Ziyong appears, looming under the sunset light, walking calmly toward the center of the battlefield. Kazuya's eyes widen, unable to believe the presence of his respected master in such a dangerous place. With a cold gaze, the protagonist stares at the criminals while his disciple calls out to him, surprised in the middle of all the chaos.